What up, everyone? DJ Anubis, and
What's going on? You know it. It's Poet.
it's Poet here on Poetic Carnage, episode 10. 10 episodes already, man. 10.
10. That's one more than
10.
9. It's one less than 11.
We got the math here too, the math wizard.
You're welcome.
So here we are tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about the NFL draft. We're going to finally give our input, our opinions, our views, our hot takes. We're going to talk a bit about our drafts for our respective teams, whether you're the Broncos, the Steelers. Then we're also going to give our top 5 winners of the draft and our top 5 losers of the draft.
Mm-hmm.
So let's not wait any longer. We're going to get into Denver because really we didn't have much to work with this year, but it was interesting, and I'm actually coming out up pretty happy. So let's start with our number 1. Denver selects Marvin Mims Jr., wide receiver at Oklahoma. The pros are he's a speedy receiver. We'll need to clean up the route running a little bit, but he's a great down the field threat, great yards after catch, which really is funny because what he does is what I was kind of hoping that KJ Hamler was going to do before Hamler got injury bug all the time. But I do like
because he can play.
Right, and I think he has great hands. He's very versatile as a receiver, and he can track the ball well in the air. Weaknesses might be he's a little bit small. Might struggle against some bigger DBs. He's got to master the route tree because I think while he was in Oklahoma, he only had like a certain set of routes that he had. So now in the NFL, you've got to kind of open your playbook a bit and learn different routes there. It's important because of his size. If he's going to play against physical DBs, that he's got to get off the line fast and not allow them to jam him there and slow him up, throw him off his route. So right now, speed is his superpower, and he's got to be able to use that. So I think these aren't my grades, but these are basically Pro Football Network's grades. They gave that pick an A- for Denver, considering where we took them.
Absolutely. And I will simply add that this was there's 4 wideouts taken, I think 4 in a row in the first round. This is a pretty deep wide receiver class. Mims could have otherwise been a second rounder. I'd seen a couple mocks have him fall late in the first round. I thought that was a little early. Here's the thing for why that pick I think is so valuable to Denver. One, it was truly best player available, and that's how you build a winning roster. And 2, he comps out to Tyler Lockett. And so if you have a guy like Russ and you have a guy like Mims, and if he plays like Lockett, and Lockett's an excellent player.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a certain chemistry there. Speed kills, and it's really important for you because if you think about your offense, and I'll shut the hell up in a second, but you have Jerry Judy who can do everything. He can be X, Y, or the slot, and then you have Tim Patrick who's a possession guy. Coming back, and I hope that he has a nice bounce back. And you have a burner with him, and then another burner with Hamler. That guarantees you that you have. They're all in the field. That guarantees you that you have the perfect sets of skills that you want on the field. And for a team like Denver who has a genius head coach on offense, the more things you can do on the field, the better. And so I thought Mims was a great pick. A lot of people didn't like it, saying that Denver had more issues at wide receiver. The reality of the situation is you build the best team that you can, and you've had some issues at wide receiver health anyway. So I thought it was a wonderful pick.
Yeah, definitely. We do have some receivers, but they often go down a lot. So again, if Hamler gets hurt or, Sutton, as good as he is, gets hurt a lot too. Like, it's like really, I'm not saying that Mims is going to solve all the problems, but, he does give you one more weapon for Russell, which is needed. So,
Yeah.
The second pick that we had, I believe, came in the 3rd round, and you actually had texted me or hit me up on social media saying, boom. This is probably my favorite pick of the entire draft for us because it's Drew Sanders, a linebacker out of Arkansas, and a much needed guy because I've been beating the drum.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? You hear me? Uh-oh. I think I lost him.
I think yeah, I was. I think that we that was weird. Like my internet didn't go out. You started like I lost you on my screen. You went black. That's interesting. Is what it
Oh
was.
wow.
But then I went black on mine, but my internet didn't go out. I have. Oh, that's weird. Anyway,
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, we needed a linebacker forever that was able to cover tight ends and like be a leader, be an impact. And I think that Sanders, he's got this great initial burst. He's an exceptional range across the field, can identify routes and quickly diagnose plays. Very athletic, can rush to QB as well. He reminds me a little bit just from build, but he reminds me a bit of more versatile and dynamic Bill Romanowski in some ways. So he'll have more to offer. Hopefully, though, that will be the great assets he brings. I think if there's anything that he needs to work on, might be getting through blocks better and finishing tackles, which Denver does have a real big problem with their current players. With we see it down the road when we go throughout the season that we're in games, but then like all of a sudden teams are running us because we can't remember how to tackle. Like we got to tackle, you got to do it. So Pro Football Network did give this an A+, and I would agree. I really, really love this pick. What do you think?
I think it was a great value. Sanders, quite frankly, could have gone um, somewhere on that 5 hour stream of ours. I think at one point there was a pick in the first round that I hated, and I said like I would have taken Drew Sanders over that guy. I think that there are times where you just put a guy on the field who's fast, explosive, and who can make plays. At a certain point, sometimes your guy can be a little positionless, to use a basketball term, to be quite frank. And I know that given how tight ends for the past 12 years, and that's not true, since your Super Bowl, I have been hearing Denver fans, including you, begging for anyone other than a corner who can cover a tight end. Um, and quite frankly, Sanders, arguably, I think in college he did sometimes cover slot receivers. I have to double
Yeah,
check. Now, I
yeah,
don't know if that's going to be a thing in the NFL, but it's good that it speaks to his athleticism. And he had some interesting blitz numbers too. I thought he was a pretty gifted blitzer, so I thought it was a really good pick. And when you're short on picks, being able to draft guys who could have gone around earlier helps make up for some of that
yeah,
lack of capital.
definitely. Yeah, like I said, he's the kind of guy I think can make an impact pretty early, and that's kind of what we need on that side of the ball.
You think he'll
Uh,
start for you? I mean, obviously there's training camp and all of that.
yeah, it's a very big possibility. I mean, I think a guy like Josie Jewell got in there pretty early, and I don't think he's like overly impressive, but like Sanders has a lot to offer, and I think he can be a starter, sure.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is like I remember in past drafts that I was pushing for guys like even though Devin Bush really hasn't panned out the way I thought he might, but
That ACL tear, he was wonderful as a rookie, and then he popped his ACL, and he wasn't the same.
Devin White, dude, I was like beating the
Yeah,
drum hard for this guy.
I know.
And
Um,
so, that's just the thing. Like, you see some of these other great linebackers you pass up on, like, what are we doing? What are we doing?
there was irony passing up on. It was one of those two that you just said for Noah Font, and I remember you going, "I don't care if he's a good tight end. I want the guy who can cover the tight end."
Right. And that's been our Achilles heel for like ever. I mean, you're playing
Yeah,
against Travis Kelsey every year. It's like, what are you thinking?
yeah,
Okay,
agreed.
so then we're gonna get into our next three picks. I'm gonna kind of blow through these. I mean, they're a little bit lower end stuff in a later draft. Riley Moss, the cornerback out of Iowa. I don't know if we necessarily needed a corner, but I don't really have a problem with it. He does apparently makes a pretty good impact on the kicking and returning, so maybe that might be part of what allured them to him. And also, it could be a possibly a safety, which we don't really need because J.L. Skinner was drafted after him from Boise State, and that apparently is, according to some Bronco fans, is a steal where we
Yeah,
got him.
yeah. The Skinner pick was really good because all of the physical skills. are there. And the thing with the draft is you have 7 full rounds, and there's so many talented guys out there that there's just naturally going to be guys who dip down. And whether it's the first round with someone like Christian Gonzalez, or whether it's someone like Drew Sanders, or basically everybody you drafted, it seems to be that way. Um, you're going to be able to find value. And that's why freaks like you and I are like, oh man, I can't wait for the 5th round of the draft. Like it's gonna be, we might be able to get a, it's like the old chess player who's going crazy because he found another way to steal a pawn early. It's we're just like, yeah. Other than freaks like us, you get some guys who can play special teams too. But I thought that, to be honest, you guys came really close to getting in my best draft list, and it was only because you weren't able to pick so many players.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah,
that's the only part that really hurts you because I think we didn't even have our even with Mims, it was like a late second, I think. So it wasn't like we really had to wait a while
yeah,
to get that point. But if there's any negatives with Moss and Skinner, the common complaint again is more about if they tend to get fooled a little bit by misdirection or fakes, so they have to be careful with that at the pro level.
gotta
Uh,
coach them. That's what you
right.
gotta
But
coach them.
really, for Skinner, it's great because you have an all pro like Justin Simmons ahead of you. So there's a
Yeah,
lot to learn there. Um, Pro Football Network graded Moss as a B minus and Skinner as an A. So again, pretty high marks considering the
I
players.
yeah. The fact that those guys could be heavy rotation players or spot starters in their first year, and it's not because your roster is horrible, is just a testament to, quite frankly, how good that draft was.
And then our final pick, I believe, was in the 5th for center Alex Forsyth out of Oregon. Don't know much about him, but they do say that he's very smart and has great awareness. The only issues he might really have currently is not much power, and he has some issues with run blocking and some past injury issues. So,
Yeah.
but at 5th round, I mean, it's a good gamble. I don't know if we really needed a center, but again, I like that Denver figured, hey, we're trying to take the best possible candidate instead of worrying about the position. And
Right.
you know,
Um, if you look at the history of Sean Payton and his illustrious career, he's always, I should say always, more often than not, he's had very good center play. And so he probably sees something like a lot of these guys coming out of college. They're 19, or they're 20, 21. Some of them are still growing. They still have room to put weight on. You know what I mean? So for him, I remember reading in passing that, hey, he could gain 10 pounds of muscle, and maybe he loses a little agility, but he's better at run blocking, or maybe he gains 15, 17, 20-ish, and then he plays guard. So there was some versatility to the pick. And it's also a depth thing. Like, you're not trying to take a center in the first, second, or even 3rd round more often than not. There's a
right.
lot of guys playing center who are not highly touted guys. We'll just say that.
Yeah, the only bad thing that might happen this year going into it, because we still have people that are complaining about the offensive line. So unless Denver addresses that in some way in the offseason, like as far as free agency, you might have people come out and saying, well, see, I've been saying it, like Elevation. He'll always be like about the offensive line or jaded.
It,
But you can't really just draft it if it's not really there.
you
So
can't draft it if it's not there. I think sometimes people forget, and this isn't a defense of the result, but year after year after year, Denver has invested in the offensive line through the draft and in free agency. And some of those free agent, things just did not work out for a variety of reasons. Russell Okung, the guy, the predecessor to Garrett Bowles, who everyone says sucks, even though he hasn't been bad in 3 years. Perception and reality are not the same. I don't care what anybody says. Um, he was horrible that year in Denver, and then he went off to the Chargers and had some good football left in him. That was a coaching and a scheme fit. The guy that you signed who tore or hurt his leg during the COVID off season, and there was a contract dispute. I think for Miami,
Oh, is
he's a
that the
pretty
guy that
good.
went to Baltimore?
Yeah, he's a good player, but he had injury issues and so on and so forth. Like there are some people who will be like, if you don't do anything short of drafting almost all offensive line, regardless of whether it's a reach or not, or trading up and getting a tackle, they won't be happy. And also, and some folks in general, they'll watch their line go out and play. They'll forget about all the injuries that there were. They'll be like, "This is the worst offensive line I've ever seen." And then in reality, it's a bottom. It's like, okay, this is probably the 25th best line, which isn't good. But there's 7 other lines. This is the math, the line's worse than them. Or it's an average line, but they're used to the offensive lines in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. And it's like that this would be a subpar line back then, but the game has changed. So it's about expectations and stuff like that. You went out, you got McGlinchey. He's passable in pass pro. He's amazing at run blocking. You had another guy whose name escapes me. Like you can't you if the idea is you're going to fix the line in one off season or 2 off seasons, that's fine. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Um, you get Bowles back. He's a good left tackle. You have McGlinchey, so now you have one of the better tackle tandems in football. You can't really complain about that.
Yeah, no, and really, Pro Football Network, they were kind of saying that if the upside to Forsyth is he has a lot of potential, so if he succeeds beyond the 5th round pick, he could be very good for and useful for us. So they grade him at B plus. So that's considering a 5th round pick. I'll take it. Not everybody's going to agree, but
Exactly. You're looking for some upside, like because most fifth rounders are going to be out of the league, and what's the average NFL career length? 4 years, 3.5 seasons, something like that. A lot of these fifth rounders are going to be out of the league, so you're just looking for something to make you think he can stick around at least that long, if not longer, as a lineman, so he's not playing special teams. I mean, you're really looking for just basic potential at that point. It was a good pick.
yeah, again, I'll talk about it later a little bit when we talk about the top 5. But yeah, I'm very happy with our draft and really happier this year than I've ever been in the last 2 or 3 years
Yeah,
overall. So, all right, well, Steelers time. You guys had
the
7 or
best
8
draft.
picks. The
I
best draft.
I
He's already
gotta.
putting it out there. He's already putting it out there.
I got it. We had now. Granted, all these guys could get injured and it doesn't pan out, but yeah, I truly believe that the Steelers had the best draft in football. Um, it
Well,
was. Go ahead.
I'm just gonna say your first pick, Broderick Jones, offensive tackle out of Georgia, definitely. And now it's interesting because Football Network did give it a B plus, but again, as I go through the list,
They love the other picks. Yeah.
well, I think 3 out of the 8 or 7. Did you have 7? Yeah, it looks like 7. So 3 out of the 7 they had like B grades basically, but then the rest were A's.
Yeah.
So, like, they liked your overall draft, and you guys are in my top 5. I don't know. I'm not going to tell you where yet, but it's very solid. And the one note that I made about it in my top 5 for Pittsburgh was, and I really, really appreciated this because, like, you and I were doing the first round of the draft live, and we were talking about Porter and where he's going to fit or whether or not Pitt was going to take him or whatever. And there was even talk prior because they took him day 2, right?
Yeah.
So there was talk like, wow, if Porter doesn't go to Pitt, he might have an axe to grind. He might because he's legacy there. So, but what I appreciate about Pittsburgh is they saw what was going on the board day 1. They were patient, and then they got their man anyway. And I
Yep.
really like that about what they did.
And that's the thing because there was talk that we were going to trade up to have to get Porter Jr. Some
Right.
weird stuff happened with the corners. There were some things. There was Forbes. There was the fall of Christian
Well, yeah,
Gonzalez.
Washington, they threw a wrench in a lot of shit.
There was some weird stuff going on. And then you had New York had to trade up for a corner. The cornerback board was really weird, and most people had Porter Jr. as the second. Most people had him at about the third best corner.
Yep.
Some people had him preference pick at the second, and a lot of people thought they're going to have to trade up to get him because they being Pittsburgh or maybe some other teams. We were able to get him at 31. I'm sorry, at 32. Some team I can't remember who lost. I think it was Miami lost the first round pick because of the Tom Brady tampering stuff. I think is what that was. So for all intents and purposes, he would be the last pick in the first round. And we did not trade. We wanted them so much that we didn't trade. There were a lot of teams calling up so they could take Levis from Kentucky, and who basically went. Yeah, I was going to get into him, but it doesn't really matter. Although best of luck to him. So I got a first round, a certified first round caliber player in the second round. I got Broderick Jones, who was the second or third best tackle on a lot of people's boards, with the caveat that a lot of people had Skoronski as number one, even though they're saying he was really going to be a guard. And I said I think he'll be a very fine tackle. So realistically speaking, you could argue we got the second best tackle. We traded up. We didn't give a ton. Our left tackle I thought was a little bit better than a lot of people viewed towards the end of the year at the very least, but he wasn't great. He's definitely good enough to be a fine backup left tackle. I got Broderick Jones. I got Porter Jr. Enough said. Those are high profile players. Fine. Okay. And the thing with, you go on and then you go look at Benton. So I get this run stuffing guy. He was all Big Ten, third team selection, yada, yada, yada. It's the same basic analysis. He's big, he's strong, he's got a little bit of a burst, good hands, got some technical playing. He's a quality second round pick. Fine. Then we get to what I like. And I like in draft things, I like boom bust prospects. And I like it gambling, especially when I don't have to gamble in the first round. So we get Darnell Washington, who at the start of the process was a lot of people's tight end number one or two.
I'm going to say that is a steal.
It is. And people are
huge
saying, well,
steal.
He's falling off of people's medical boards. Well, I don't care because I didn't have to take him in the first round or the second round. Mm-hmm. And I'm watching all of these teams take first round and second round tight ends going, this is, to me, the tight end class, and something pops in some of my analysis later, but it's a 2017 tight end class where you had Kittle ended up being the best guy. No one really knew much about him. There's O.J. Howard, Ingram, a couple other names. There's 3 tight ends that went in the first round. Jake Butt, all these big names. Only, a lot of them were pretty good, solid guys, but they weren't worth a first rounder. And you had teams going up and trading up and taking these guys in the first and second round. I'll rather spend the third or fourth rounder on a guy who's better than them, and it just comes down to medical. Well, some people said, well, he fell off of our list because of the medical. And some teams said he passes our medical list. Gronk fell off. The reason why Gronk, and I'm not saying Darnell is going to be as good as Gronk, but if you go back to when Gronk was drafted, he fell to the second round because he has spinal stenosis. Kittle had injury concerns. I don't care. Tight ends, good, big, physical tight ends or fast finesse tight ends who aren't named Travis Kelce don't play 16, 17 games a year healthy anyway. It just doesn't
and that's
happen.
really the only difference because Kelce is able to stay healthy. So Kittle and Gronk are just as good as Kelce, but they don't stay healthy all the time.
Right. Darren Waller.
But here's the thing, too, though, is that Mayer out of Notre Dame, he was like on a lot of lists as the number one tight end, and he fell a lot. He fell beyond even these guys. So to me, like that just tells you that it wasn't just something Washington was facing. It was like all the tight ends were facing this.
Exactly. And if you look at the other tight ends, Darren Waller's a stud, but he's missed games. And then you look at the glut of tight ends like Dalton Schultz or Dawson Knox or all of these guys. There's good quality tight ends who are getting 40 to 60 catches and 5 to 700 yards and 4 to 8 touchdowns. And so many of these guys are basically the same player. And none of the tight ends in this class really look like they're going to be anything more than the higher versions of those dudes. One of them is going to be a stud. That seems how it always turns out. One of them is going to go the way of O.J. Howard, where he does absolutely nothing. This best season, he'll have like 34 catches or whatever, and so on and so forth. And there'll be some guys who are like Evan Ingram, who are like, that's a good player. Okay, and that's fine. I don't want to take those guys in the first or the second round unless I have excess capital. I don't want to take a tight end in the first round ever, unless he's just like an absolute stud. So I would rather, and I mean this totally, I'd rather have Darnell in the third or fourth round than take whoever it is. Like the Bills traded up for, I cannot remember that guy's name. They traded up for a tight end, and I was
Kincaid,
like,
was it
why?
Kincaid?
Yeah, and I'm not saying that guy's not going to be good. I think that guy's probably going to be pretty good, but I don't think he's going to consistently break 1,000 yards. I don't think he's consistently hit 10 touchdowns. I don't think he's catching 80 balls a year either. So he doesn't even fall into that I'm really a wide receiver category.
Well, he's probably going to spend a lot of time blocking.
Yeah, and he's good. I mean, he's probably going to be pretty damn good. But you look at the rest of our draft. Um, third round, the 93rd pick on Darnell Washington. He cleared medical. Then we get Nick Herbig. And look, if you're a linebacker and you play in Pittsburgh, you're probably going to be good, right?
Yeah.
I could go on and on about why he's a good depth piece, why he might actually end up starting for us, like some people think that he might. Yada yada. He's got a little bit of speed. He's got power. He's got some technique. He's a pass
So
rusher.
do you think he's going to be a linebacker? Because when I read about it, they had him set it kind of like edge.
Yeah, I think he's going to play the edge because like if you look at pulling up our depth chart, I should have had it pulled up ahead of time. I apologize.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I always fuck up. And
I should have. Well, I had everything but my depth chart pulled up. Um, Alex Highsmith, he had 14 and a half sacks. That's a ton of sacks.
yeah,
He had. I'd have to double check through the game logs, but the last time I looked, it was about 75 to 80% of his sacks came when T.J. Watt was on the field. He was not doing much without T.J. Watt because he's not really a number one pass rusher. If you look back at Bud Dupree, he did nothing for a while when he was with the Steelers. Then T.J. Watt comes on, becomes the best pass rusher in football. Fuck you, Jaded. I love you, but it's T.J. Watt. It's not Myles Garrett. It's T.J. Watt. And then all of a sudden, Bud Dupree has a monster year in Tennessee, gives him a lot of money, and then there's no T.J. Watt in Tennessee, and they cut him, and we almost signed him to be a bench player for us. I think Pittsburgh, they look at Highsmith. He's a nice depth piece, but he's a depth piece that does well because of scheme and does well because there's TJ Watt, and I think they want a
yeah,
little bit more.
that's sort of the thing, and that's where I'm hoping Sanders becomes like a T.J. Watt or like Al
Yeah.
Wilson or like a Ray Lewis. Because when you have T.J. Watt on your team, and this is sort of like the Ray Lewis effect, is where the rest of your linebacking core step up,
Yep.
and that's what you want. So yeah, so in this case, you've got Herbig who is going to be motivated to say, look, man, I got one of the best guys next to me. I got to step my game up and be a part of this.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's going to happen.
And with Highsmith too. I mean, and I'm not just trying to. I'm not just trying to big up my favorite player, T.J. Watt, but if you're an outside
Yes, you
linebacker,
are. Yes, you are.
I know I'm trying to be. I mean, if I was, I would just say he's the best defensive player in football. Probably is. I'd say that if you look at the win loss ratio without him, he's almost as impactful statistically as a quarterback. I might say that he's had one of the greatest, if not the greatest, 3-year sack totals in NFL history. I might mention some of those things, but when he's getting doubled, and you're like, well, I guess I have to go beat one tackle who's going to get zero help. You should be able to do it. And I'm not saying that Highsmith isn't a starter. I'm not saying that Herbig is necessarily going to win the job. But when I saw that pick coming, I was like, oh, we might have had a steal, and we might know how good this guy really is, and he really might take Highsmith's job eventually. And so I loved it. It was a good pick. He fell where he was supposed to be taken. I loved it. And then I'll wrap up. Corey Trice, probably a little bit of a steal. Nice player, athletic, all that stuff. Again, a lot of corners, so some corners fell. Nice value pick. Not saying he's the second coming of Rod Woodson or Champ Bailey. Really liked the pick. And then other than that, I'm trying to think if there's anybody. Corey Trice. Uh, we took a nice project guy in the 7th round. So that's the Steelers, but they had the best 4 rounds. We gave up nothing to get an elite tackle. We got the third best corner, second best corner maybe in the 2nd round, and then nailed some more picks. Basically, going to win the Super Bowl. We're the best.
Well, here's the grades they gave for each player for Pittsburgh for Pro Football Network. So Broderick Jones was a B plus. Joey Porter was an A minus.
Yeah.
Benton was a B plus.
Hmm.
Washington was an A minus. Herberg was an A minus. Corey Trice was an A, and
Yeah.
Spencer Anderson, the center out of Maryland, was a B.
Isn't it interesting how you get an A if you're a mid to late round pick and there's any reason to be excited about you at all? Like that seems to be how a lot of people grade.
And well, that comes right back down to the quality. So, like,
Yeah.
we talk about it every year. It doesn't matter if it's you and I. It's like the world in general when it comes to the NFL draft is like, they rank all their players and they say, well, these are your best guys. But the thing is, like, every team isn't going to need those best guys. Like,
Yeah.
they might want them, but they're going to say, well, we have some other needs we got to address first. And so we're going to go to a different list. So then all
It
these guys
is.
start dropping. And so,
Yep.
like, Trice might have been like the 12th to 15th best corner, but if they rank him that highly, like in terms of like, if you just have a really good class, well, then it's still a great grade. I mean, like,
Exactly. That's the God's honest truth. And then there's also different, like if you look at all the stuff that happened with these tight ends, there's wildly different grades from tight end to tight end.
yeah,
There's wildly different grades on these corners. If you have, to your point, if there's 12 really good corners and you're like, well, I'm the 13th best, me at the 13th best in that class, I might be the eighth best in the year before or the year after. And there are also some teams who like, look, most teams want to do best player available, but if I have two stud corners and the best player on the board is a corner, I'm probably not going to take him. I'm probably going to trade back. Like it's not a perfect thing.
yeah, because like we talked about on draft night, Dallas took Mozzie Smith with their first round. Now he was like sixth or seventh on my own personal ranking
Yeah.
list. But you had brought up points that there was talk that he was actually much better than I had him ranked as. So
Right, and I was making that point in fairness because one thing that I hate, and I do feel guilty about this, like to criticize some of these guys on what might be the best day of their life. I don't enjoy. And it's nothing personal.
no,
Like with Mozzie Smith, I think he's going to be good. It's just that he's a nose tackle, and while some mock people had him going, hey, you know what? You can take him between 20 and 35, and I respected some of those guys. I just disagreed, and it's a thing where part of it is like if this was 2002, Mozzie Smith, because if he was getting drafted during the days of Casey Hampton and Vince Wilfork, he might have been a top 15 pick. You know what I mean? There's that positional value to it too. And so I try to always bring up other people view it this way because one, I think it's good analysis, and two, I don't want to ever come across banging on some 21, 22-year-old kid who all they did was go out and be a stud in college and they
right?
get to play in the NFL. Like
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
wonderful day.
It's not Mozzie's fault that he got drafted. If he got drafted too high, it's not his fault. Like that's
Exactly.
just all he can
Yes.
do is go out and play his
Cash
game.
that check, baby. You cash that check. That's
Right.
what you do. You
And that's
cash that check.
basically like we talk about it in terms of, if Mozzie got drafted that high, he did something right when they were
Yes,
interviewing and looking at him. So
he did.
he sold himself
That's
to be
right.
drafted. So he did the
And
work.
and the Niners ran all over the Cowboys, and they're like, we can't let that happen again.
Right. Right.
And here's the other thing, and I want to say this too. 10 years ago, I think about 10 years ago now, Travis Frederick, I think his last name was a center, and the Cowboys took him in the first round. They got laughed at, and they should have because they overdrafted. And they went on to be an All-Pro, but that goes on to be like you made a mistake and you got lucky. You made a bad bet in poker and then you won out on the river. But to be fair to Mozzie, there are legitimate people who were like, okay, that's a little bit of a reach, but it was a big need. They needed to take him there. He's the 25th or 26th guy, and quite frankly, he if Mozzie, and this sucks too. I feel for him in this way. If you had a half step faster and had some pass rush potential, he would have gone much higher.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And who's to say? There are guys who develop that. There are guys who they get to the NFL, they change their diet, they get a little bit stronger, they whatever, and all of a sudden they can do things that they could not in college, almost as if coaching matters. So I think it wasn't like I was like, oh my God, he's not going to be good. But I was like, oh my God, you couldn't trade back 3 picks, 4 picks, and then take him then? Because taking him 28 or 27 or 25 or 32 feels different than taking him in the early 20s.
I will say this: you made a great point right there about whether or not Dallas could have traded back to get him. There's pros and cons to that, and we're going to get into it when we get into the top 5 losers draft, because one of the complaints about the Cardinals was maybe they spent too much time trading back instead of taking quality players.
Yeah.
So that's a good point to make, because Dallas said, you know what, we really believe in him. We're going to take him right now.
And there weren't a lot of nose tackles available. So my initial reaction was like 8 out of 10. What the fuck are you doing? And then it got tempered back to I think that was wrong, but it's no longer the alarms going off in my head.
Right.
And I like that guy, and I don't have anything against the Cowboys. I like memeing the Cowboys because it's funny, and some of their fans are a little silly. Not bad people, they're a little silly, but
I know
I
a lot
was.
of Cowboy fans, but they're all generally pretty cool. I don't really
They
run
are,
into
yeah. They
problems.
do not make my list of bad fan bases. Philadelphia, might I introduce you to some Eagles?
Oakland,
So
or I always want to say Oakland, but Vegas now.
yeah, they don't have
Okay, well,
fans.
let's get into our top 5 winners of the draft. I
Yeah,
was using theathletic.com as kind of a reference point for some of this, but I didn't follow their exact rankings for my
yeah.
own. So, do you want to go from like 5 to number 1? We'll just alternate.
Yeah. Why don't we? I think that works.
Okay, well, number 5 for me, it could have been Chicago. I like that you mentioned them, but like I said, I went with the homer pick here, Denver, because mainly because I felt like they maximized what little draft capital they had. They came out pretty good. I hope that it stays that way. I hope they all pan out. So it's me just kind of throwing love that way. I'm not going to be mad if Chicago or the Colts are there, because they both had really, really great drafts. But I just put Denver at the number 5 spot on my own list.
Gotcha. Um, for me, I have Houston. Um, and they would have been higher. We'll get there. We'll get there in a second. So they got their quarterback. They got C.J. Stroud, and everyone knows I'm a C.J. Stroud guy. I was a Bryce Young guy too, but I was a C.J. Stroud guy. I thought that he showed in his biggest question was an interesting one. Was why don't you use your legs more, and will you use your legs more in big moments and big games? And are you a playoff choker? Right. Those were the knocks on him. And he goes out against Georgia, and I don't want to hear a damn lick about, well, they didn't win. It's like, then make the kick. Um, what I know is he made some big plays with his legs against a damn near historic Georgian defense. And he made some big throws, and he played his ass off in that game. Um, and I would rather have to coach a guy to be maybe a little bit more aggressive with his legs than have to worry about if he's going to run into a linebacker. So they got an elite prospect there. They got Will Anderson Jr. Now they traded a lot to get him, and I won't lie to you. I thought Will Anderson Jr. was an elite player. I think he was getting a lot of Von Miller comps, and I didn't like that because he doesn't have the same bend. Von actually had a little bit more power coming out of college. Like Von had, like I'd call it a baby bull rush. Anderson Jr. does not. He's all speed. He's all finesse, but he's a stud. And if that means you have to keep him away from bigger tackles like Darnell Wright, then so be it. That's on the DC to use him well. So they got two guys who were arguably top 5 prospects I had Stroud higher as a prospect than I think a lot of people love. Folks are like, blah, blah, blah. He's the 10th, 11th, 12th best guy, but he's a quarterback, so elevates him. I thought he was a top 5 prospect, same thing as Young. Maybe it's because I really like polished guys coming out of college and mechanically sound. Where they fell off, and I hate to do it to him. Juice Scruggs is a sinner, and you drafted him in the second round. Nathaniel Dell in the third round. I feel like you overdrafted them. I did not have, you get to some of their later picks, I did not have a lot of respect for Jarrett Patterson. I watched some Notre Dame football. That did not look like an NFL player to me. I'm just gonna be honest. So their mid rounds and some of their later round picks I didn't love, but they were able to, by hook or by crook, come out with arguably the best offensive player and arguably the best defensive player. And on a team that is as bad as the Texans, that means a lot. So I put them at 5, and they were 2 picks away from being higher.
Yeah, so number 4 is the Houston Texans for me. You made a lot of great points there. To me, I could care less about the rest of their draft. They have the best quarterback in this draft, in my opinion. We've talked about
That's
this
right.
at length. I also think that Stroud's going to be an immediate impact for them. So looking back at last year, they were very competitive. Despite all the woes they had, they were very competitive with teams. They almost beat a number of teams.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Stroud's like the difference maker there. So if Anderson and company do what they're supposed to do at the pro level, it's only better for them overall as a franchise. But I think they've got their quarterback of the future without a doubt. People will debate between him and Young, but I really think Stroud is the best quarterback in this draft.
And they'll debate with Anthony Richardson too. And
Right.
there's a certain point, to be honest, where like if your team can make a credible argument that we took that guy in the first round and that's our guy, I think as a fan, unless you've blown through 4 quarterbacks, which some franchises do, Cleveland, you fucking mistake by the lake. You have to
Mistake by
feel,
the lake. Is that what you
yeah,
said?
the mistake by the lake. You have to feel good about it. You have to feel good about it. And for to your point, and this is something that we have similar philosophies. I brought up, I think 2-3 shows ago, the GM talking about how the Jets have killed the last 3 drafts. But the way the NFL works, it doesn't matter if one pick doesn't pan out and it's
Yeah.
Zach Wilson, unless he either pans out or they can replace him. They're hoping that's what Rodgers is. Let's be honest. If C.J. Stroud goes on to be a Hall of Fame quarterback and Will Anderson blows out his knee, no one wants that, or he just sucks, and all those other guys are just fodder, doesn't matter. You got your dude. You got him.
Yep.
And that's how the draft works. So it's the games at that point where you can have 3 great drafts and it's like, oh wow, but our quarterback sucks, so we're 8-8. Woo!
Yep.
Let's trade 5 first rounders to go up and try to get a guy. So I agree. I think that the Texans, some people were real harsh on them. I liked what they did.
Yeah, and to be fair to the Colts, like, look, Bryce and CJ are gone.
Yeah.
And you are in desperate need of a quarterback. You just spent 2 years with 2 guys that are considered at least above average. So you had Rivers and then you had Wentz, and neither one could do what they needed to do.
Rivers, Wentz,
Ryan,
Foles,
Matt Ryan, right?
and Ryan. That's 4 guys. And out of those guys, the guy who did the best was Rivers, and he was just like, I'm a broken old man, and I'm only playing through with guile and stuff like that. They needed the quarterback, and it's different.
You have to take the chance there. You just do. Like
you do. And Richardson, his physically speaking, is amazing.
Yeah.
And look at what the game is. Mahomes was super raw when he came out. We like to pretend that he wasn't. He was super raw. Carson Wentz was super raw, and he had several good years. His body failed him, and he was a bit of a diva. But I'm not going to rewrite history and act like Carson Wentz wasn't that guy for a while. Josh Allen, super raw. Lamar, super Raw. Those were
Fields.
4, at least at one point in their career, MVP candidates.
Hmm.
And so you have this a guy from the Eagles who did a lot. Oh, here's another one, Jalen Hurts. So that's 5 guys in recent memory. And the Eagles, who are a great franchise, looked at Jalen and they said, "Let me just give you a bunch of money now, so we don't have to deal with what Baltimore's doing." And then
Yeah.
Baltimore was like, "Oh crap, they have a point. Lamar, let me give you a bunch of money now, so we don't have to forfeit a season." There is for all the people who are saying Richardson, it won't work. It's a guaranteed bust. It's 2023. In 2000 and 1999. Maybe he's too raw, but the game's easier. Offensive coaching is better. Quite frankly, it's easier to hit wide receivers. If you look at that talent, and if he has the stuff between the ears, all this stuff, like it's a guarantee that AR-15 is going to be a bust. It's foolishness. I almost put the Colts on the top 5 just because they took a uber talented quarterback.
Well,
They're
even if
one of
so,
my
there's a common theme, and I don't know if it was Jaded or Mo that said it. Even if AR-15 fails, like you have to pull the trigger. You're there. You have to
Yep.
pull the trigger.
Yeah.
So even if he doesn't work out, like you can still find a way down the road. Like you probably be drafting top 10 again if you don't do very
Yeah.
well.
Exactly.
And you just go from there. You can go after Caleb or whoever, like, if that doesn't work out. But I don't blame them for saying to themselves, we just tried 4 different veterans and we couldn't do jack. So we have
And
to try.
at different points in their career.
Right.
Foles, end of prime. Carson Wentz was arguably still in prime. Rivers was the pure rental out of all of them, and Matt Ryan was he wasn't too bad the year before with that
Well, we
awful
hoped
surrounding.
that he would do
Yeah,
something.
exactly. We hoped, and yeah, hope does not equal prayer or fucking facts. Apparently, like it just is what it is, and I'm tired of people just instantly going, "Oh, if that quarterback, if he's not a Trevor Lawrence or he's not a Cam Newton or he's not a perfect prospect, you know what? Joe Burrow went number 1 overall." And a lot of people are like, "Oh, he's being overdrafted because he's talented, but he's not uber talented." It's just like, guys, like there's only one John Elway, okay? And in that draft where there was the mythical John Elway, Dan Marino was the 4th or 5th quarterback taken. So I
Yeah.
don't know what to tell you. I don't.
And I think wasn't Jim Kelly in the same draft? I
Jim
mean,
Kelly was in the same draft. Like, be happy now that it takes about 2, maybe 3 years tops to know if your guy can play, and not back in the 70s when you legitimately had to give them half of the decade. So just, I cheer on the young quarterbacks. I remember you said
yeah,
something like, if Bryce Young weighed 15 pounds more, I'd think he's quarterback Jesus,
yeah.
right?
I forgot who
Like,
I was talking to about it, but I'm like, look, most of our famous quarterbacks that we've known the last 15 to 20 years are retiring. So
yeah,
it's time. It is now time for these younger quarterbacks to show themselves to become
yep,
something. So whether it's Lamar Jackson, whether it's Josh Allen, whoever,
yeah.
Mahomes has already shown that he can be the guy.
Mhm.
We need to start seeing these stars. So even if I have my doubts about guys like Justin Smith or Justin Fields, it's time for him to show his stuff. So get out there and
Exactly.
do it. So
Herbert
that's
fell. Herbert fell to the bottom of the top 10 because he didn't in college. He didn't throw guys open. Okay, and then he got to the pros and he worked really hard and he threw guys open. Josh Allen couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, so they and Hog Driver brought this up. It was really cool. In the off season, he took all those electrode stuff, put them on his body. He started throwing to hit the perfect pass, and they compared that to most of his passes, and they fixed his mechanics. Jalen Hurts fixed his mechanics. Patrick Mahomes has no mechanics, and it doesn't matter. Like it's just like these guys you're looking for. Is there a valid reason to take you in the first round? And if the answer is yes, then I'm only not going to take you. Like you look at Levis, like I argued with Wave, friend of the show, shout out to Wave. He fell because he interviewed poorly. He came off as an asshole. He came off as immature, and people were worried about some of his injuries that he had in college, and they compared him to Carson Wentz. Now we're reading more about Wentz. His body failed him, and he was also a bit of a pouty hoe, to borrow some message board language. And shout out to Carson Wentz. I love Carson Wentz. At this point, I'm all in. Carson Wentz for life, baby. But that's why he fell.
loser.
He not for those first couple of years he wasn't. He was magnificent. So, we'll get back on track. But like, if I was a Colts fan, I would have been stoked to be able to take Anthony Richardson, and I would have been stoked to have him. And if everybody wants to pretend like quarterbacking is an exact science, or you should only wait to take a perfect prospect, when Andrew Luck was drafted, teams are offering 3 or 4 first round picks to the Colts, and they said no. So if Caleb Williams comes out and he's like Patrick Mahomes 2.0, which is kind of unfair to hold him to that standard, but then whoever drafts him is going to be like, no, I have quarterback Jesus. I don't care what you're offering me. So you might not even
All
get
I
your guy
know
that way.
is if the Colts hadn't drafted a quarterback,
Yeah.
the position they were in
Yep.
this year,
Yeah.
Indy would have burned that frickin' stadium to the ground. I
They
don't
would have
care
been
what
playing for
quarterback they would have
yeah.
taken. If they would have passed on
Yep.
any quarterback in the first round, they would have got really lit up.
Then they're just saying, hey, we have a good roster, but we're throwing it out the window another year,
Yeah.
and now we're hoping to get Caleb Williams. That's what you're saying. Or you could have a guy like Anthony Richardson who's about as talented as a Caleb Williams,
Right.
definitely not as gifted, maybe not as polished as Caleb is, but he's on that same god tier talent level. And it's just like, are you interested in winning games? Are you interested in trying to go out and build your franchise up, or are you not? And if
I kind of look at it like, when we drafted Drew Lock in the second, like I was still excited. Like I think as
yeah,
a fan, no matter what team you're on, you have a young quarterback coming in, like unless he's like a fifth rounder, you're excited to see what they can do.
you
I
should
mean,
be.
it's actually kind of a running joke on the Bronco board because I take shit sometimes when I just want to see a guy like Rippon just to see what he can do. I'm not saying he's going to do anything, but I'm like,
No, your expectations are he's 90% he's going to suck.
yeah, if I'm looking at my starter like Bridgewater and he's sucking ass, well, like
Yeah.
put Rippon in, let me see what he can do. Like
But
at least
now you're loving the backup scrub, and
right.
it's just
Yeah,
like,
it
I don't
is
know.
kind of silly about that, but
There's something to be said for the most popular guy on the team's a backup quarterback. There's something to be said for that, but there's also something to be said for, well, we're out of playoff contention. Bridgewater has been limited since he had that horrible leg injury. Why not? Rippon does not have a big arm, and he's not big and strong and fast. But let's see. But none of those were things that you could really use to describe Drew Brees either. So let's see if we hit the lotto on the 1 in 100 or not. I gotcha. So is it on me for the fourth best?
yep. Who's your number
Okay,
4?
I take the Bears. Um, the
How
Bears,
Bears? How
the
Bears?
Bears, had a shit ton of draft picks, and they got Darnell Wright, who was arguably the best tackle prospect, but he kind of fell a little bit because he's probably more of a right tackle.
Right.
Okay, but they had a historically bad offensive line last year, so Justin Fields is happy. Then they took Jervon Dexter, um, defensive tackle. I wanted them to take an offensive lineman, but I don't know if there was anyone on the board that would have made sense. But their run defense, which is weird for Chicago, was not the best. All right. They take Stevenson out of Miami, a pretty good cornerback. They get Zach Pickens in the third round. I love that value pick at 64. To shore up the defensive line. They get some running backs, some wide receivers. They had 2 5th-round picks, 4 4th-round picks, some 7th-round picks. Uh, their roster is just really bad. And while I would have liked to have seen them maybe shore up the offensive line a little bit more, what they did is they replenished their roster. Um, I'm not super mad that they didn't take a wide receiver high, because the only one that they could have justified taking where they were at, going off of the big boards, was the gentleman from TCU. And he slid for, I think, a pretty obvious reason. He's inconsistent and he's big, but he doesn't always play big. Like the wide receiver.
Yeah, but a good point because I will say this real quickly. He fell, but like from what I read, like, and I probably agree with it, he's probably the best player in TCU. So if you're gonna take somebody, take the best player they have.
Right. No, yeah. No, I agree. And maybe if they had 10 other good players, they might not have gotten killed in the national championship game. But get fucked.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
serve it, I spike it. You set them
He
up, I
just
knock it
shoved
down.
it in my face, cock
It
balls and
wasn't
all.
it wasn't your face. It was the face of the national media who fell in love with the above average team who got lucky. But that's okay. I don't need to rub it in. anymore. So I'll bring it up in about half an hour. Um, I look, you could argue, well, Darnell Wright, not a left tackle. They got DJ Moore, but that's only one wide receiver, so they're really banking on Chase Claypool, who ended up being the Joey Porter Jr. pick. I do look at who you have on your roster, what you could have. Well, when we get to the Detroit Lions, we're definitely going to talk about who's on your roster and what you could have done differently. But with the Bears did a really good job of making their roster, I think, a lot better on paper while having addressed some of those needs in the offseason. And just to be blunt, a lot of people also said Darnell Wright can play left tackle. So while I don't think he is a left tackle, Andrew Whitworth was also 6 foot forever and weighed a bajillion pounds with long arms too. So who knows? And they did such a good job of hitting on their first 4 picks. They did best player available. I loved what they did all off season. And they just, I could have put them at 5th. I like how they acquired a lot of picks, especially in the mid to early rounds. I could have made them an honorable mention, but I also think degree of difficulty getting that trade off and getting as much as they did warrants a little bit more. So Chicago Bears, good job.
Yeah. My only points in Chicago is, and I do think it's important. Like they took best player available, so that's good. I agree with you also though that they didn't really address the line, and one thing again, I know I pick on Fields a little bit. You've known this for a while. Same with Jackson. My worry with those two guys, all right, is one, they got to be consistent passing, but two, as athletic as they both are, I don't want them running for fucking 1,000 yards a season, dude, because it's not going to last, and all it takes is one shot and they're done. So
Yeah.
I need these guys to be able to keep them upright. So like it's not just Justin. Like it's got to be the team has to say we got to protect this guy. We can't let him freaking get ran over.
That's really fair because when we were going back and forth on Fields, right?
Yeah.
One thing that you were consistent about is like, no, you're right. You know what? Sometimes when he's running around, it's because his line has failed him. I would show you clips of like, I would post clips like, what is he supposed to do in this situation? And your response is run like the wind because they're trying to kill him, and his offensive linemen are assassins paid by the other team.
Yeah.
It does take it does take an offensive line that's competent, and they did not. I still remember when I asked you like, how bad do you think their line is? And then I showed you the stats, and you're like, I did not know that a line was that bad.
Yeah.
It makes me feel better about Denver's line.
And I don't think they're and I think I mean I don't know what their roster looks like right this minute, but their running game wasn't consistent either. So like
No.
if you can't run the ball and you don't have anybody to throw to, this kid has nothing to do but fricking run for his life. That's all
While
he
he's
can
playing
do.
in his second system in 2
And
years.
he's trying to. I mean, hats off to him. He's trying to win the freaking game. Like it's like
yeah. It is, and you know what? And one of the things I liked about Fields was he knows how to slide. He actually does a pretty good job of protecting himself. He does a better job of that than Lamar. Because
if I'm the owner of the Bears, or even freaking if I'm fucking horrible on coming, I'm like, look, Lamar, you're a great guy. Love you. You're an athlete. But you better fucking slide. I cannot like let you get plowed and lose your life.
Lamar is Conan. Like he's just he that man is scared of. I'm not saying Fields is scared, but I know what you're getting at because it's like, look, if you slide and you don't get the first down, and it's not the championship game, the Super Bowl, the game for the #1 seat, like we get it.
If you want to do the helicopter, you wait till Elway and
yeah,
do the
exactly.
Super Bowl, okay?
You wait till you have an off season to heal,
right.
and then we can talk about how you don't need OTAs. Like we can work with you. With Field, like I wanted one more offensive line, and there was one of my buddies is a Bears fan. I have a lot of Bears friends because I've spent most of my life in Illinois. They had a couple prospects who were getting better as the year went, so I understand that. But I was just sitting there and I was like, I don't care. Trade up and get Anton Harrison and just say we got 2 new tackles. We'll figure it out. I love Justin Fields. Please don't kill him.
That's what it comes down to. Like, I mean, look, I still have my doubts, I do, but at the same time, like, you got to throw the kid a bone, man. You got to do something to help him because looking at that roster last year, it was amazing they were even in games, but it was due to him and some of the defensive play. But
Yeah, they had a couple nice playmakers, and then there was a game where he was throwing some beautiful passes, and the wideouts kept dropping it, and he started the game. It was like 3 for 10, and he did have one real bad throw in there. But there's three drops. One was like for a 40-yard bomb, might have been a touchdown, and one was in the end zone. And I remember that was what I did in those threads. I was like, here's the clips of Justin Fields getting fucked over. And it's like, you know what? He can't make them catch it. And Claypool should be better. They got the cat from Carolina. Hopefully some of the other guys can step up. I don't think this is the make it break it year for Fields necessarily,
no, and I think you
but
called it earlier because you said that they just took best player available. So it's guys that are probably making an impact, but it's not going to be fixed this year. So at
yeah.
best they'll be a 500 team.
If that defense gets better and they can keep them in games longer, so he doesn't necessarily have to be Superman, that would also help.
Right.
Good God, like Nail, what would do a lot for them, and this sounds stupid. If they got a UDFA who could just do spot duty on the line and give them some flexibility on the line, even that would be a boon. Um, whew. Go Bears.
Go Bears. The Bears. All
The
right.
Bears.
My number 3. This is sort of like a hot cold rating, but I think that the draft I had was really good, and that's the Seattle Seahawks. I think they did a really good draft,
Yeah.
but it's kind of hot and cold to me because the first 2 picks should be immediate impact players, but the rest, like, I still worry about that defense a little bit. They spent a lot of picks on offense, which I didn't think they needed a lot of help with. First thing is first, obviously. Can Geno Smith repeat what he did last year because he was playing out of his mind? Probably the best I've ever seen him play overall. But their defense, man, they gave up just as much as they were giving out. So that's a problem. That's one of my concerns. But when we're talking about depth and stuff like that, the impact the first 2 guys, Witherspoon and what was it, Smith, the receiver? Yeah.
So that was big picks.
So those 2 will probably be immediate impact. So the rest is kind of like really, can they contribute? But I still worry about that defense a little bit. But I do like what they did. Like, at least they addressed some positions of need.
Yeah, and so they're my third as well.
Okay.
This is, and I have a weird reason for liking their draft as much as I do. Like, their first 2 picks were beautiful. I think they speak for themselves. They had my wide receiver 1. They had my cornerback 2, who could have admittedly was, for many people, cornerback 1. They have a stud corner, and his name escapes me. And then they have the guy who played alongside Sauce Gardner in Cincinnati. So Kobe White was horrible at the beginning of the year. He was getting killed. That's his name. He got better as the year went on. So they feel like our secondary is loaded. Derek Hall is a guy who I wasn't necessarily high on, but by all accounts, if you believe in him, they got a steal and they got a big time pass rusher. And Pete does know defense. So I take that, and then I take the next step in my analysis. They gave Geno a new deal. It's a deal they can get out of. Geno got worse as the year went on. Some of that was some injuries on offense. I think part of it was he couldn't keep playing over his head for so long.
Yeah. Do you think it was just a matter of people starting to figure him out again?
I think that there was some of that. I think that they didn't run the ball as well as they needed to at times. And I think what Seattle did was because they added, like, I'm looking at their draft right now. So they got Charbonnet from UCLA at running back. They drafted a guard, Bradford, from LSU, who looks like he's going to be pretty good. Um, they're getting some depth pieces because they have a fairly good line, and I think what they're doing is they're setting up for the next quarterback after Geno if it doesn't work out, because they'll be able to say, look, Lockett is slowly phasing out, so they'll have Jackson, they'll have oh my
Smith.
god, yeah, they'll have some running backs, they'll have a good offensive line,
They're
and
gonna
if they're
sell. They sell Metcalf, right?
yeah, Metcalf. So they'll have Metcalf and Jackson. They'll have that good line. They'll have a stable of running backs. They'll be able to put a quarterback in a nice situation, whether it's Geno or someone else. And I think that's why they went the balanced way of drafting, because if Geno does not play well, what's going to end up happening is they're going to have a pretty low draft pick, because that's how important the quarterback is. Also, their schedule is going to be harder.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
it's
much harder.
gonna be harder in that division. Okay, so the Cardinals are gonna be two easy wins because there's no Kyler Murray, head coach, new head coach, all that stuff. Fine. San Francisco should be good, and the Rams at least look like they'll be a solid team with a healthy Stafford, Cup coming back, yada yada yada. So I think there's a method to their madness. Honestly, the pick that they, other than their first two, that I liked the most, and it's probably going to blow up in my face. I thought Mike Morris in the fifth round, and for some reason I thought he went in the third round. I thought that Mike Morris could be one of the steals of the draft. I thought that he slid. Um, and if they end up getting two good pass rushers out of that draft to go alongside with their no-brainer first two picks, that's a pretty nasty draft. Very holistically sound. I didn't think that they reached. I thought there was a good method.
Hot take time.
Yep.
Does Drew Lock start it all next season?
Yes, because of injuries.
Okay, cool. I just recent news with Drew is that he re-signed with them. He said he really likes it there. He made a nice little pod shot about learning more in Seattle he ever did in Denver. So,
Oh, he opened the playbook in Seattle. That's a good start, Drew. Way to go, buddy. Paxton
yeah,
Lynch made that same exact comment, and
yes, he
that's not
did.
good. You don't want to have commonalities
And
with
meanwhile, he's
Paxton
playing
Lynch.
somewhere else now. So, like not even in the NFL. He's
He's
like in
playing
some.
fucking Madden. That's
Yeah,
that's what Paxton's
yeah.
playing.
All right, let's get to number two, and I think yours is going to be reversed with mine here, because I think our final two picks are the same, but they're just in reverse. So
Yeah.
number two, I have Pittsburgh. Like I said earlier, I really like the draft. You guys are so patient. Didn't like panic when Porter was dropping and whether or not to take them. I think the picks that you all made are going to be an impact this year. You already know my fucking love for Pickett. I love that quarterback. If Denver hadn't gotten Russell, I would have hoped that we would have taken him or something if we had a chance to. Either way, I think Pittsburgh's in good hands. I still like Tomlin a lot as a coach. It's really amazing he's still there. Like with so many coaches that get let go, they still give him his due and keep him there. So I'm really happy about that. Before I even made any lists or before the draft was even done, I didn't know Pittsburgh would even make it into the top five. But as I look at their drafts, I'm just like, at the draft this year, I'm just like, they did such an amazing job and a lot of quality picks. So even as much love as I give Denver for their maximizing theirs, I think Pitt did even more by maximizing theirs. We talked about Darnell. Fucking steal, dude. It's third or fourth round. Like, that's just fucking amazing.
Yeah. Um, they they are my one. And it's not even Homer. Usually I'm accused of being a Womer and not a Homer. For those who don't know, Womer, like woe is me, like, oh, we're always going to lose. The reason why I have them, and it's pretty clear who your number one is.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, my number two, I think, is your number one. Like you said, it's the Eagles.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to get to the Eagles and why their draft was so amazing. They traded up for Jalen Carter. Okay. They have the locker room culture. They have a history of making guys with some issues work. Um, Carter was on many people's big board as the best player in football coming out of college. He was disruptive. He was disruptive in a way that is comparable to Ndamukong Suh, comparable to Jadeveon Clowney, comparable to some of the most dominant defensive linemen in the past 20 years coming out of college. Sue was amazing for a while. He had a lot of baggage that came with him. And Jadeveon Clowney is amazing. He's so amazing that he doesn't have to try very hard, and that's why he doesn't ever get 10 sacks. But he'll get you like 8 and destroys the run game.
Yeah, well, the thing was, like, just real quickly, Stu and Clowney, man, at this point in their careers, they're both like mercs for hire. So it's not a bad bet, but they're not going to be the dominant
exactly. Exactly. So being compared to them when they're at their peak in college, knowing that they're still viable this late in their career, Sue's like 4 years older than Clowney, I want to say. I think Clowney's like 32 or 33 at this point. I remember when the Texans took him, we thought he and J.J. Watt were going to win Super Bowls with just strict defensive line dominance. And Clowney was like, yeah, I don't really care. I don't really. I got my guarantee
didn't
money.
He face like a lot of injury issues too.
He does. Well, he does. There are things out there that suggest he does not really take good care of himself either. He lives off of his natural talent and I guess joy of stopping the run and occasional sacking. Carter, he should be a 14 sack a year guy. It's insane. Carter, the reason why he slid was you have that whole debacle of the streetcar racing, which we do not have enough time to nitpick the nuances of that thing. That is a head scratcher in many ways, and somebody died. You also have the fact that he showed up purportedly out of shape, said I'm not talking to teams outside the top 10, didn't want to do the combine stuff. Kind of protected himself towards the end of his college career, didn't go all out, which, to be fair, I understand. I didn't think he should have played the national championship game. After I saw that running back blow out his knee, Lattimore, in South Carolina, I was like, nah, you can't pay me. You could not pay me enough money to play.
Isn't that so weird? Because like Lattimore did it, but then you remember, fuck me, the guy from Miami that we used to have,
McGahee.
Yes, he did the same thing. I'm like, man, that sucks. Like, these guys are excited to play that game, but like, it's like that something like that's going to ruin.
And they don't want to quit on their team.
Yeah,
and I get it, but I'm trying to make sure my mom never works again, and so I'll root hardcore for the sidelines. Jalen Carter is a monster, and Philadelphia's roster is good enough that if he busts, it'll sting, it will hurt, but it's not a complete catastrophe. And I like his fit there. I like that he's playing alongside Jordan Davis. I like they still have Fletcher Cox and a couple other guys who are older. They're not really as good as they used to be anymore, but they're still viable players. You get to their next pick, and quite frankly, Nolan Smith, if they had stayed pat and taken Nolan Smith at the beginning, the middle-ish part of the draft, no one would have really said boo about it. And instead, they got him near the very end of the draft. I know that a lot of Chiefs fans wanted him to fall to them. You have Tyler Steen, who was a controversial pick. I think that he played tackle. I think he's going to be a guard for them. You have Sidney Brown, who was a good safety and a run stopper for Illinois. You have Kaylee Ringo, who he is a 4th rounder. And
I think you really liked him too, because you were talking
I did. I had a 2nd round grade on him, and I stand by it. And I think he there were mocks where he was still going in the mid to early 2nd, late 1st round up until a month ago. I really liked Ringo, and he's a hell of a pick there. I don't get the Tanner McKee pick. I hated it.
Where is he out of? I'm not
Stanford.
Oh, okay.
He was a darling pick. So at the start of the mock season, now everybody has their darling quarterback who's a late 1st rounder. That's who he was in this draft cycle. And he wasn't. he's a developmental quarterback. Maybe you can get him to be a good backup. Maybe you become lucky and he becomes the next Matt
Do
Schaub.
they have a vet on that team at quarterback at all?
Ooh, that I don't know.
The only reason why I say is I don't like to pick either if that's all they're gonna go with because like when I think about because like you said they're my number one team with the draft, so you take a team as good as they are and then you strengthen it with these first couple of picks. If something should happen to Hurts, you need a veteran presence there to help keep that team going towards the playoffs because McKee's probably not going to be that guy.
Mariota. They have Marcus Mariota,
Okay, so they
and
do
they
have
have
at least somebody competent.
right, and they have Ian Book, who they'll cut for who actually they might practice squad him now since they have different practice squad rules. Um, I don't like the pick. I mean, it's the guy's not a total talentless scrub, but I don't know. It felt like it was a luxury pick. I want to say that that's enough of a reason to put the Steelers over them. Part of it, I think, for me, it comes down to this: they're still gambling for Jalen Carter. Nolan Smith was a nice player, but he wasn't a dominant player, and you could argue that he was, he's talented, but was he a kind of was he is Georgia going to be the new team like Alabama where everyone's really gifted but they all kind of make everyone around them overrated because everybody's at least above average. Whereas when I look at the Steelers, I just go like, no, you can conclusively say he's a stud, and you can with Carter, but there's no questions around Broderick Jones, for character. Joey Porter Jr. is a better corner than Nolan Smith was a pass rusher.
Right,
Just
right.
I think objectively speaking, you can make that claim. What the Eagles now, where the Eagles do get the benefit of the doubt is they were picking so late and they managed to make a lot of stuff work. And they read the board really well. And it comes back to the science versus the art. The
Yeah,
science of the
and I think what really for me is why they're number one is like it just goes back to the idea that the Eagles could have not drafted a law this year and they still would have been all right going into next year because they're just that good.
yeah, the roster's
So
slick.
the best thing right now is like you can pretty much say every pick they have is a luxury pick because
Yeah.
these guys pan out, it's better for them. But if they don't, they're going to be okay.
Yeah, no, they have a really good roster, and one of the things that I didn't like about their roster heading into the offseason was I was like, I don't think that they necessarily have the best depth. Well, their depth just got a lot. Carter is going to be a starter for them.
Right.
Um, I don't. Nolan Smith, I think, is going to be a rotational player for them. Um, and he'll get heavy rotation minutes. I don't know what they're gonna do with Steen. Steen's gonna be really really interesting to see how his time works out with them. But I mean, it was just a great draft, and to be fair about the Carter pick, if there weren't character concerns about him, he would have been a top three pick, and they would have never had a chance at him anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
the Steelers were rumored to want to trade up with Chicago to take either Porter Jr., but the real target for a lot of people was Jalen Carter. Like they were saying, they're going to take him. Tomlin loves him. He'll fit in with the, yada yada yada. So that was we just got done with our. Did we do our? We kind of did our twos and our ones at the same
Yeah,
time.
we're pretty much done with the top
Yeah,
five.
we're
So all
pretty
it was
much done.
basically
Yeah,
alternated the
yeah.
and I don't really have a problem with Pittsburgh being number one because you make a lot of solid points about that with the quality of picks. So like it's
Yeah.
not going to bother me one way or the other. But it's funny that both you and I have the top three right where they about they
It
are. So.
it it felt like there some people would push back on our three, but our one and our two were amongst the most commonly ranked one. And to the audiences, we don't expect you to be super duper into reading all these NFL draft grades. Just know that they're mercurial. There are a lot of people who are like, "Oh, I love this one," and then the other half of them would say this one was bad. So there was a lot of commonality towards the these are the two or three best and the two or three worst, but even with the worst, there's a lot of different names going in
Oh
there.
yeah, I
So
mean Denver was rated on one side as 26, and I'm like,
yeah,
okay,
I
I
think I know
kind
which
of
one you're
get it, but
talking
at the
about.
same time, I'm like, you have to look
You
at
you
what they had to work with. I
you
mean,
you also can't just be like, well, I didn't like that player and they took him. It has to be. I didn't like that player, but the argument for him is
Yeah.
that's how you have to do it. So now we get to the bottom five is way more fun.
Yeah.
The bottom five is way more fun.
And my number 5 is Arizona.
Okay.
And I do like Aguilera because I did mention him from LSU. So I think that's a really good pick for them. I heard, though, that when it came to some of the drafting, that Murray was giving his input on it. So, like, apparently the Paris pick was something that he pushed for.
Yes, he loves that guy.
So I understand it because Murray's like, he's like Fields. He's like, I don't want to run the rest of my life from the defense, so I need somebody protecting me. But you have to be careful when you let the player choose your player. So hopefully Arizona saw it the same way he did and said, okay, yeah, we like this guy. We're going to go ahead and put him and draft him for you. But they also lost a lot of defensive guys. I think JJ retired.
They lost Zach to you guys.
So they need to. I mean, they have some work to do yet, and that's why I think you and I agree that this year is basically just trying to rework it. They got a new scheme, new coach. So now it's basically, well, if we break 500, great. If not, we're just going to go draft again next year.
Right, and they're not going to have him for a chunk of the season anyway. The reason why the Cardinals did not make the list for me, I just liked. So I'll just in quickly.
Just real quickly for me, just finish up.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
My only issue is, and I again mentioned it earlier, they a lot of complaints where they traded back too much. This is a point where I forget what team you brought up, but I wish they would have just took best player available instead of trading back so much.
Jacksonville.
Yeah, or whoever. But the reality is,
yeah,
they need talent. They need to like stick with talent. So I know what they were trying to do, but sometimes you just have to bite the bullet. And
so you think that so there's a way to trade back and get more picks and get more talent, and you think but that they tried to execute it, but it wasn't successful.
Right.
So if they had, that makes sense to me. The reason why I didn't put them there was, one, I think they got the best tackle prospect, and then two, Garrett Williams and Michael Wilson were just quality, second and third round picks. I get what you're saying though, because there were some studs that were on the board. I thought that, to me, I looked at them and I was like, that's a solid draft. Could have gone better. They got good players, but they could have executed it better. And that's why you get to my 5. That's Detroit. Detroit, they got Gibbs, who's a good running back, and they got Campbell, who's a good linebacker. But it doesn't matter.
Real quickly, did I mention the night that we were? Maybe not, because I don't think it happened that night. So the coverage of the draft. So you watched the rest of the draft on your own, right? There was a chick that was there with him. I can't remember her name, but she was a Detroit Lions fan. And she was funny. I actually really enjoyed her takes because she was actually better than the two guys that were with her. So the Lions made another pick, and she's like, oh, look. He looked so happy coming to the Lions, and he had like this frown. It was probably just a resting bitch.
Oh, it was a safety. It was a safety who didn't get picked. Yeah.
Yeah. So she was making these crack jokes about her team, like oh, he looks so excited coming to the Lions.
Because it was Branch from Alabama who might have been a first.
That's
rounder.
it. Yep, Branch.
Yeah. No,
he's actually the best safety in the draft.
Me and my boy Hinkle, he was the guy from my infamous Chargers story because he likes Trevor Lawrence. And I was like, oh, don't worry, the Jags will win this game. And he's like, there's no way. I'm like, just wait. And then we had 3 or 4 other guys coming to the Discord that night later, and they're like, yeah, we all knew the Chargers are going to blow it. And we bring it up on the show, and you're like, there's precedent, baby. That's what they do. He made the same joke about Branch. He was like, that dude looks pissed. He's like, I was in Alabama. The weather was nice. I was supposed to get drafted by the Dolphins because their secondary is bad. I got to go to Detroit. It's cold. It was amazing. But they fall back into that. You got good players, but it could have been better. Like, they had Swift, who they traded. They traded him on draft night, so they did not get maximum value for him. They let Jamal, what was it, Williams, go, who's a good back for them. Um, so they have Bijan Robinson that they could have taken if they're going to take a running back. Who I compare him to Saquon Barkley in this. When the Giants drafted Barkley, the argument for it was he's a running back and the position is devalued, but he is so amazing and so transcendent. It's like when the Cowboys took Zeke, or when the league corrected, I call it the Le'Veon Bell correction, when he fell to the second round after there was like 1 or 2 years of no backs went in the first round, the league was like, yeah, we're probably overdoing it too much. And then you start seeing backs kind of get drafted in different parts of the round. Like, if Adrian Peterson came out again, we would draft him in the top three because he's amazing. But that's the exception, not the rule. So I look at the Lions and I'm like, Gibbs can play. Now, granted, he would have probably been there in the late first round or maybe the second round. And Campbell can play, but there was a lot of other defensive players you could pick who were probably better than him. And I hate to say it, but he's just fast enough to be a first round pick. The 4.65 is just fast enough for a guy with his athletic profile. So it's like you took these two guys, you took a linebacker and a running back in the first round, and it's 2023, and you had other options that were better than both of those on the table. They fucked up the science. There's the art of the draft. There's the science of the draft.
You and I talked about it that night when it happened, and B.J. Robinson's there.
Yep.
And we said the gap between him and Gibbs is like this.
Yes.
So basically, you said Derrick Henry is there. We're going to pass and we're going to sell for Philip Lindsay over here.
Yeah.
That's not a good way to go about
No.
it. Like, if you feel like you need a running back, you take the best guy that you got there.
And he's not just a better running back than Gibbs. He can play. He runs routes in the slot, in their actual routes. Like he's not. The obvious comp to him is Marshall Faulk. Okay. And I'm not. And Marshall Faulk, in my opinion, is a top 5 running back of all time. So I'm not like doing. After I saw what we did to C.J. Spiller, he was comped to Faulk. I was like, I don't know if that's a fair one to put on these guys.
I always felt that Spiller is more like Reggie Bush or something.
Bush, right? And there was that was the argument, Reggie Bush, and he was overdrafted, and you ended up being right. But Spiller had some damn good seasons. He was a good player. He just wasn't a generational god tier all time first ballot Hall of Famer. So I don't want to put that on Robinson.
Right.
But like there's similarities in profile and speed and quickness and ability to catch and run as a wideout. And then you go, no, I want to trade back and take Gibbs and then take a middle linebacker. Well, if you don't want the running back that much, that's what you're telling me, then don't trade Swift. Don't let your good power back walk when he was a good back. It's like you got the order. They're the kid who did the math problem wrong, but they got the right answer. Oh my God. And I'm not trying to bag on them because look, if you throw away all context, all right, their draft is literally gold in a way, right? Because they have those two guys who are really good. They have Sam Laporta, who hey, I'll take him in the second round. I'll take Brian Branch in the second round. I'll take Hendon Hooker as my project guy, developmental guy in the third round. It was a good draft, but it could have been great. It should have been great, and they mitigated its greatness by being sloppy leading up to the draft. They obviously didn't do their homework. Something went fundamentally wrong here, and if some of those guys don't pan out, and the first two guys don't become Gibbs has to be an all-pro guy within 3 years. Jesus God. It was a good draft on paper. I don't want to rant about it too much longer, but it was a good draft on paper, but the context of it is just damning.
Yeah, that's interesting because their problem that I felt last year is the problem that my number 4 has, and that is defense. So they put up a lot of points, but again, they gave it all up. And so my number 4 as great as they are, great as the quarterback is, Buffalo. I know they're in your list somewhere, but Buffalo's in
Yeah.
my list. You get your tight end, great, and you get a couple more offensive weapons on the line, whatever. But you're ignoring your defense, which underachieved. They just did. They had moments where they looked great, other moments where they failed, especially in the second half of the season or second half of games. They were like beating some teams like 17-21 nothing at halftime, and then allowed those teams to get back in it.
They
And,
were,
and then you add with the bad defense versus Allen like not playing his usual spectacular self by making picks and everything else and
the
turnovers.
injury, yeah, and then you didn't necessarily fix the line either. And
Right.
so if they had picked the line or the defense or had a nice mix, I know exactly what you're saying. You've heard me rant about the weapons on the team, and is that they are on my list. Um, I had them tied for fourth, so I think what I'm going to do is I'll go to the team that tied for, and then get to Buffalo later, because I have a lot to say about Buffalo, and I feel bad about it. And I'll give the caveat now: their front office is really good, and I'm probably wrong, but we're here for our opinions, and if I'm wrong, I'll wear it.
Well, they're
Um,
geniuses for the way they handled Allen because
yes,
so many teams like give up on their young quarterbacks and they invested in him. They said, "All right, we're taking you. We know you're rough. We're going to invest in you and get you where you need to be,"
yes,
which they've done.
and they made the playoffs the year that they took them. So they,
So
they
quick,
traded up
like
to get them. Yeah,
quick hot take on Buffalo, real quick. Does Stefon Diggs become a problem for them because he gets very animated and very upset when he's not the focal point? He has that. He's a very great receiver, but he also is a very diva receiver. So, does he become a problem for them?
I think he will, but in an interesting way. So he goes nuts when they underachieve and they blow leads, and he does get a little, I'd say, testy when they don't throw him the ball, especially when he's getting single coverage. I think that he is I don't think that he's a diva. I think he's a fiery leader, and I think that if he was a linebacker or if he was a tight end, you know what I mean, we would be like, oh, we love that. But he's vocal, and he's vocal when the team plays bad, and he's vocal when the coaching is bad. He was the guy who opened the door on the Hamlin game and said, "Nah, we're done." They do look to him. He is a guy who says what a lot of people are thinking in that locker room. And I think that he will become a problem not because he's being selfish. And there are times where I'm like, they should be throwing him the ball and he's got a point. I think he's going to be a problem when they don't win the Super Bowl this year and he goes, well, what the fuck are we doing? Um, so I'm trying to think of a guy, of a wideout I can comp him to. He's more of a Des Bryant where sometimes the optics are bad, but what he's actually like, you remember the Des Bryant was like, oh, he's going nuts on the sideline, but he's screaming, no, we can still win. We're still in this. He's pointing at himself, and they're saying that, oh, I think he's saying they have to throw him the ball. He's like, it's on me and it's on you, but visually it doesn't look good. I think that's what Diggs is.
So he's
Um,
more like Des Bryant versus Terrell Owens.
yes, and Dez's issue was he was a good guy and a good teammate. He was not the most socially aware person. And a lot of that's not on him. A lot of that's just him being himself. And he got some bad media coverage. And I'm not a blame the media guy.
Right.
Most times. Sometimes I got to slap him around. Anything else on Buffalo? I know I kind of cut you off.
No, go ahead. You said another 4 team that you had.
Yeah, they tied with the Chargers. I hated what the Chargers did. They drove me insane. So they took Quentin Johnson at 21. And that is the one pick I will defend. Now, I was not a huge Quentin Johnson guy. He's a big guy who plays small. He has some bad drops, and his routes aren't clean. Those are mostly coachable things. Um, at 21, that is a fine pick. A lot of people didn't like the pick because they have Eckler, they have Allen, they have Mike Williams. Well, Eckler's demanding a trade because they don't want to pay him. And he's like, I catch 100 million balls a year. Fuck you, pay me. Mike Williams is amazing, but he gets hurt a lot. Keenan Allen is amazing, but he gets hurt a lot and he's old. So taking Quentin Johnson to ensure that your stud quarterback has a guy to throw to, well, while maybe making up for the fact that Eckler might not be there, is fine with me. However,
interesting thing about that, real quick, is
yeah,
that
yeah,
Eckler has done pretty well, but I always felt that the Chargers were kind of at their best when they had LT and Sproles. There was like this give and take.
yeah.
Eckler can kind of do both, but do you think they're just relying on Eckler a little bit too much? Because like they do have some backup running back, but they don't seem to
They're
perform as well as they're supposed to.
They're running Eckler into the ground, and I don't blame him for being like pay me or trade me because he knows what the reality is for running backs.
Right.
He saw what the Bears did to Matt Forte, and he's kind of in that where I'm a pretty good runner, but I'm amazing catching the ball. I think that for them, if there was a team to take Gibbs, like let's say Quentin Johnson let's say the wide receivers are off the board like we thought they might be. Maybe Gibbs there makes sense. I still wouldn't have done it, but it would have made a lot more sense. So Quentin Johnson is okay there, although I don't think that he's the player that they think he is. This is where they lose me, okay? Because their defense, they got a lot of Buffalo Bills and Baltimore Ravens in them, where they just mysteriously stop playing football after halftime.
Yeah.
So to fix their defense, they're like, we need to get Tulo Poloato. Okay, he's a run-stopping defensive tackle. It was your secondary that was getting smoked. And then they're like, oh, no. We'll get Dane Henley. Okay, that's a linebacker. That's not your secondary that's getting smoked. And then they're like, oh, let's take another wide receiver. So they go wide receiver, non-impact defensive player, wide receiver. Now, that's their board. That was their big board. Now, the fact that I think their big board was horrible aside, which I don't like those players, to be honest. But there are arguments for them. But I don't think that any of those guys are that great past Johnson. Okay. You did not fix the issues on your defense. Now, they do have some linebacker depth. But Derwin James is your best player on defense. And he's a joker safety. And he makes a lot of plays. And when he is not on the field, your defense is bad. So do you take a Christian Gonzalez? Do you take a guy, who can lock down a wide receiver, who can play in a lot of zone and do stuff like that? No. You take the wide receiver followed up with another wide receiver, and they're sandwiching in between a defensive tackle and a linebacker. I hate it. Their team did not get significantly better. And those guys were not, if you look at most mock drafts, you're not seeing anyone go, amazing value, should have been taken around earlier. Some of those guys are called reaches. Now, I don't know if they're necessarily reaches. I just didn't have them very high. But they got one impact player at the wide. Thank God it's a premium position. In 2023, wide receivers are now as important as corners. It used to be corners were way more important than wide receivers. Thank God it's an impact position. But then you look at their other picks. Okay, Jordan McFadden at guard, Scott Matlock at defensive tackle, Max Duggan. That does nothing to help you. And you have Kansas City in your division, and you have Cincinnati in your conference, and you have Jacksonville in your. If Jacksonville beats them in the playoffs again, now Jacksonville's their daddy. Like, you don't know how good the Jets are going to be. You don't know. The Steelers might be good. The Ravens might be good. The Browns have an argument for feeling like, hey, we're a live team. Fuck the AFC North. That division's so brutal. And you went wide receiver, defensive tackle, linebacker, wide receiver. Horrible. Now the more I think about it, I should have had them worse. To be honest.
Well, my number 3 is and this is really kind of like a wait and see approach, but at the moment, like I'm just cautious, and it's Green Bay. And they loaded up a lot on offense. Now, obviously, they're trying to help Jordan Love, who's taken over the quarterback duties for Rodgers. But the problem with that right now, and I know the good news for Love is that he's been sitting for a while, but we don't really know where he's at as a quarterback. We don't know if he can actually uplift a team and carry them on their back if he needs to. And I think that if you're ever going to have a quarterback of the future, you're going to have a quarterback who can kind of do that. So let's just say if Green Bay had Justin Fields, I'd feel more comfortable with their draft. I just don't know where Jordan Love is. I know a lot of people like him, but there isn't really much on him in terms of like his ability and what he can actually do with that team. So much like Buffalo, there's some weaknesses on the defense that they kind of ignored. And then like they gave him a lot of weapons. I like Musgrave. I like Reed out of Michigan State. I think those are great picks. Rodgers is probably pissed off that they now decided to do that, but uh, it's just a matter of I'm not really sure where Love is and whether or not he can take advantage of the stuff they're giving him. So
Yeah.
they go and they get these offensive guys, but if the defense is not improved and if Love doesn't quite show up like Rodgers does, what does it mean? I mean, they're obviously it's another one of these cases where they're kind of like Arizona or another team where they have to kind of wait and see where they're going to be at next year if they have to
Yeah.
replace them. So
And to me, it's the Seattle point that I made, where if Love's not the guy, then the next guy's set up pretty well.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
they like Jordan Love a lot.
they do.
They so most of the tape in the NFL on him was bad, and his college tape was he was Zeus one moment and not so hot the next. Um,
Right.
I didn't. If I had to nitpick their draft, I remember when they took Lucas Van Ness. I was like, "That's a good pick. That's a good pick." And the more I thought about it, was I don't know if that's a good pick. I think it's fine. I don't think it was a reach. Um, it wasn't. I liked it less than I did immediately. Um, but there is something to be said, I think, for last year. I remember reading and hearing all the time, Green Bay's defense is getting younger. It's getting younger. It's getting younger. They might like some of their guys in maturation roles. Um, I don't mind. The Musgrave pick was fine. Again, I'll take Musgrave in the second round. Jaden Reed, that was good. Tucker Craft, I didn't love it in the third round. I don't love tight ends that much. The Sean Clifford pick, I absolutely hate. That was they lit that pick on fire. There's no fucking no one knew who that was.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
no one, and I know that because I didn't know who that was. So I think for them, and they did something smart. They gave Love an extension. Um, they're going to literally turn it loose, and they're giving him, I think, some of these weapons to give him a fair shot as well.
Well, no,
Um,
that's a lot like Buffalo and Allen. Like
yeah,
at least they're saying we're going to invest in you, man. It's time for you to show yourself and what you're going to do. This
because
is
he has had plenty of time on the bench. He got that
yeah,
old school development.
yeah.
Um, I understand why they were one of those teams where they were like, some people were like, this is one of the best drafts in football, and some people are like, what are you doing? So again, usually there's not that much discord between the grades, but this was such a wild draft with so many good players in it and controversial players in it that I get it. Um,
Yeah, this may be just more of a case of like it could turn out well, but it could be just a case of like they address certain positions, but did they get the quality players to match
yeah, and so when you looked at their draft, I'm guessing you went like, if you looked at their draft and you're like, wow, there was not any defensive players that fit, you might have given them a different grade.
right?
I gotcha. No, that makes sense because it's kind of like, some of the people on the board, they're like, you have to draft offensive linemen, and you're like, all the tackles are gone.
Yeah,
There's
yeah. I'm not gonna just do it because, but like
right. That's how
we've
you get
seen
a pack.
teams do that, though, and it
Yeah,
really
they're called the
backfires a
Raiders.
lot.
Yeah,
So
it's bad. Speaking of the Raiders, they're an honorable mention on bad drafts. Um, so I will get to Buffalo now.
okay,
Um, so My issue is they went offense, and I don't think that they're. And I took a lot of notes, so I am going to be reading off of them. Sorry, Buffalo fans. I didn't want to do this. Your team made me do this. Their offense didn't get much better. Like, they have Cook at running back, who was a pretty high draft pick. He looked nice last year when he got to play, but he's a smaller back and he's already been injured. So they were a team I would have loved to have seen taken a running back, especially because a 1-2 punch is kind of mandatory in the league anyway. They have Dawson Knox, who, so here's some crazy numbers for you. 517 yards. He was 14th in yards. The guys from 14 to 10, it was like 1520, 1550, and then like, or not 50, 520, 560, 580. So there was not a whole lot of difference there between where he was and the 10th best guy, 4 slots up. And not even that much between the 9th or 8th guy. Okay. So it's the 2017 tight end draft class for me. And we talked about it a little bit, where there's 3 guys taken in the first round, some in the second round. Only one was really great. A handful were, maybe above average, decent, like Evan Ingram, for instance. And the rest did not pan out for a variety of reasons. So you're going to trade up when you have Dawson Knox to take a tight end. What are the odds that he's better than Dawson Knox? What are the odds that he's going to be better than Dawson Knox in the future? What is the odds that he's going to be a tight end? Like, because look at the top tight ends: Kittle, Andrews, Kelsey, Waller. All of those guys miss games except Kelsey, and he's 33, so he might start missing some games now. So even if he becomes that guy, he's probably going to miss games because of the nature of running down the field over the middle of the field and having some safety go, well, I got to take your legs because I can't arm tackle you. Whee! I hate the pick. I hate. Go ahead.
I was going to say that, like, I don't mind the tight end, but I'm in totally agreement with you. Like, if you're going to take that position, that guy better be the same as Kittle or Kelsey.
If he
and he's
is,
not
no
there.
one's
I don't think
expecting
this
it.
is that guy.
Exactly. If he becomes that, no one saw it coming.
Right.
No, even Buffalo saw it coming. And then here's another problem. Let's say he becomes. Now I'm gonna argue against myself in a second, in a minute, just to prove a further point. And I'm gonna change the projections because he athletically kind of somewhat similar to Dawson Knox. Okay, let's say he's catching 70 balls, 800 yards, 9 touchdowns. So now he's in that top 5-ish range, although he's not quite a healthy Kittle or healthy Kelsey because those guys hit 1,000 to 1,200 yards, right? Especially Kelsey. Is that really a second option? I mean, think about it. If that's your number 2 option, that's pretty good. So maybe that's your second option. So he has to put up those massive numbers just to be the guy that you wish Gabe Davis did. Let's talk about Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis, 48 catches, 840 yards, 7 touchdowns. You know what that averages out to? Piddly ass yards per game and just under 3 catches a game for a touchdown once every 2.5 games or so. There were wideouts you could have traded up for. You're in the business of trading up. Quentin Johnson makes a lot of sense, for the Bills. Oh my God, did Jackson Smith. Zay Flowers, who you wouldn't have had to trade up that much more to go get, would have made a ton of sense. You didn't get a true blue guy who could have been a number 1 or a number 2 for a while behind Diggs. You went and got a tight end who's not much better than the one that you already have. And you're blocking.
Yeah.
So
because if you haven't addressed that offensive line,
exactly,
he's not going to have time to get rid of the ball to the tight end. Like, it's
right.
just
he has to chip. And they got Osiris Torrance, who we're both high on. But then they took Dorian Williams, who's a linebacker. And look, linebackers are great, but that's not why your defense sucks. or not even sucks. That's not why your defense fails you. Part of it is that scheme where they only do that one thing with Leslie Frazier, and they need to be able to do more than one type. Justin Shorter is fine. Nick Broker and Alex Austin are fine players, especially in the rounds that they got them. But you didn't get a tackle. You didn't get an elite pass catcher. You didn't get an elite defender. You acted like you're not in salary cap hell with an aging roster, with a running back, and Cook's amazing. I'm targeting him in fantasy. I think he's going to be great, but he's small and he's already gotten hurt. There are a lot of ways to defend that draft, and I get it, but it just wasn't enough. And they had the opportunity. If all those wideouts went 8 to 16 and the price was steep, okay, you're like, well, I am in salary cap hell, and I do need these draft picks in the future to get these guys. I get it, but based off of what happened on the draft that I can demonstrably see, you did not do enough, and you could have.
Yeah.
So I really dislike Buffalo's draft. I honestly, I don't even feel like they got. I feel like the best player they drafted was a guard in the second round.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Like, if you're gonna make that, like, I understand that Allen needs that outlet pass for the tight end, but if you're gonna do that, that tight end better be the best freaking thing since sliced bread. Like, you cannot just settle for a guy that's just as good as what you already have.
And I can argue that there's 2 or 3 tight ends who went after him who were better.
Right.
Sorry, it's just if he comes out there and proves me wrong, this isn't going to be an instance where I say like, oh, you got lucky, because Buffalo is good at drafting.
Right.
But I just have to call it like I see it.
I mean, they took a tight end that was in like at least my top 3. So I mean, they're not.
Yeah, they didn't reach for some
Right.
crazy guy.
It wasn't a reach, but it's like you got other issues you might want to address a little bit more importantly. But
right.
Moving to my number 2, the Commanders from Washington. They hit some of the points that they want as far as the positions, but they ignored other needs that I felt were probably more important. So this is a team that I felt really could have used a good tight end. They could have used a backup quarterback to Howe, and they could have used a really good linebacker. So it's a team that I think that just didn't really address the areas that I felt were more important than what they actually addressed. And so Howe is going to be your guy, but he's going to need some help. And, defensively, they're pretty good. They're already kind of set there. They've been competitive. But when you got all that pressure, when you're not scoring, this is sort of like what Denver ran into last year. You got to be able to score points. And so they didn't really give Howe a lot of weapons to work with. I know he lost a couple of guys on offense. So I think he still has McLaren, though, doesn't he?
Yes, he has Scary Terry.
So he still has some weapons there. But, now you're asking him to kind of pick up the mantle, which is fine, because if this is a year sort of like some of these other teams where we're just going to feel you out and see what you can do, great. We'll see what Howe can do. Can he uplift his team and carry him on his back a little bit?
But it's so hard to ask him to do that, because so Devontae Adams it churns out 1,500-yard seasons like clockwork.
Yeah.
I'm not a Rodgers guy as much as I used to be, but when it was just him and Adams, it was still hard on Rodgers. In Rodgers was pretty decent last year, all things considered, and is still a great thrower of the football. He's a great pure passer. So if that's something that Rodgers is going to struggle with, going, hey, Howell, when that team shades the safety over to Terry or just puts 2 corners on or whatever, make something happen. It's like, bro, I just got here. Like, what are we doing?
And you and I, we were talking about on draft night, because this is where things get kind of interesting. Their first pick is Forbes, who isn't bad.
No.
But you and I were talking, because we had Gonzalez up as number 1 corner on the board. And so it was kind of weird that they just, I guess it wasn't just them. The other teams that passed on Gonzalez as well. But
yeah,
we still had him rated on our big boards pretty high. So they were kind of like one of the first ones, along with the Jets, to kind of throw a wrench in everything and say, oh, wow, what are you doing here? What's going on?
And you know, they're trying to build a dominant defense, and they have some really good pieces there. God, imagine how good that defense would be if Chase Young didn't have all those injuries, right?
Right.
Uh, but they took all these corners, and it's like, to me, it just tells me they don't really think that Howell is their guy. They're setting him up for failure. Maybe they're trying to tank for Caleb Williams, and they can give him a good defense. I don't know. If they just went best player available, I understand it. But like, man, going corner, Stromberg is a guy who can play multiple spots on the line, and then guard. It doesn't really feel like they're setting up for the next quarterback, because that's what that says to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really a head scratcher. Obviously, it could pan out for him, but I just like right now. I think the only thing I can say, maybe you're right. Maybe they're just saying to themselves, "We're going to see how it goes. We're going to try to get some depth in here and see that if we need a quarterback next year or not." So there might be just seeing what Howe does and go for the best.
Anything else? I already gave you a snack.
Yeah. Um. Oh goodness. So my next one is the Niners. I'm just gonna keep it brief. I know they needed the punter. I know they love incremental game managing and playing football like it's 70s, and it works for them, and field position, and they don't have a quarterback, that they don't know who their quarterback is, and all that stuff. I don't care. You drafted the punter in the third round. Like, I don't care. You drafted Jair Brown in the third round. That okay, all right. Then you took Jake Moody in the third round. That doesn't seem great. Then you took a tight end. Okay, that didn't bother me so much. Uh, it felt like they were just like, our roster's great. Who gives a shit? Like, I don't understand. I'll be honest. I look at their roster. The safety makes sense. I know that they hate their special teams spot, but here, who's their second pass rusher? Off the top of your head, can you tell me who their second pass rusher is?
For San Fran?
Yeah,
No, I can't tell you.
right. You can tell me the Bosa brother.
Yeah.
Um, who they got the linebackers. It's just I looked at them. And I knew they didn't have a lot of picks, and I don't care if you don't have a lot of picks and you get a good player. They got McCaffrey. They tried to win a Super Bowl. I'm never gonna fucking bash anybody for that. But I didn't see how their team got better other than their kicker. Um, and at the end of the day, like, I'm looking at their depth chart. Oh wow, they they took it down. Oh, that's fucking hilarious. That's the most Shanahan thing I think I've ever seen in my life. It just, I thought at first I was gonna have them at 5, or maybe as a dishonorable mention, and then the more I kept looking at it, I was like, you just took dudes, and they didn't trade back. They didn't do anything. Like, it was just their entire thing was a nothing burger. And the way you keep that strong roster churning year in, year out, year in, year out, is you find ways to add value to your team. And I'm not saying I don't. They took a punter in the third round, man. I can't. They took a fucking punter in the third round, man.
Yeah, I think the best way that I can like compare this would be what we talked about with Philly. Philly had a great roster, a great team, and they just added more depth. But it's like they pick quality players. Now San Fran, it's like they have a great team, but then they didn't pick quality players. It's like you said, they kind of just said, we don't care. We know we're going to be a playoff team. So we're not going to worry about who we're taking. But that's where you should really take advantage of it, because despite the lack of picks, you still want to make the best possible choices. And so, like, sure, if you need a punter, but that dude's going to clearly be there like later in the draft. Like, you third round, no. Like,
Yeah,
unless you somehow like a crystal ball and this is going to be the punter of the
right.
lifetime.
And if they knew some other team was going to do that, then fine. I'll eat my words, because for all I know, they did know that, and that's fine. However, that punter story was such a big deal for so long after it, that I feel like that justification would have been out there by now. And I found their ESPN roster, not their own roster. And so like, okay, Jalen Moore is an okay right tackle. Spencer Burford is a pretty good guard. Their center is whatever. They have a good left tackle, good left guard. Their line is pretty dang good. It could be better. They have their wideouts. Obviously, they're not trading up to get a quarterback. You know, the reason why I asked about their pass rusher, his name is Drake Jackson. He came out of USC, I think, a year or two ago. He's a pretty good talent, but he's opposite of Bosa, and he's not making the plays that you think that he would necessarily make. There were pass rusher. They play a 4-3. So there's typically more 4-3 defensive ends than 3-4 linebackers because it's weird, but you can usually find more 3-4 backers who can transition to end than vice versa. And so I'm just sitting there going, why aren't you making your pass rush that much better? If you're working on your secondary, to be honest, their corners are okay. That's probably the weaker part of it. I don't know. It didn't resonate with me. It felt like a huge wasted opportunity. Maybe I should have had them 4 or 5.
No,
Maybe
I
that would have
mean,
been
like
fair.
you're right. I mean, like if you're gonna waste picks and just not really care, I'm gonna do one or two things with this team. One, I'm either going to focus on offensive line because even though they could run the ball, pass protection was kind of sketchy at best at times. That's why their quarterbacks were getting killed.
Yeah.
Two, if I'm going to go defense, I'm going to do exactly what you said. I'm just going to improve the defense. I'm going to spend every pick on defense, but find quality players.
Yeah.
But you got to do one or two. Like you can't just say nearly this, and this because, like, yeah, okay, punters are great, but is that really going to be the difference between Patrick Mahomes going 50 yards for a touchdown or a 99? Because he's going to do both.
Exactly. And here you want to make your team in case of the worst case scenario. So the worst case scenario is Matt Stafford comes back and he's beating that ass. Matt Stafford has never been like, oh no, an 85-yard drive. What, my poor arm, I can't make those throws. Kyler Murray can run for 50 yards, right? Now, granted, he's going to miss some time, but if the Rams and the Cardinals, if their offenses come back, and it reminds me of the saying, like, if you're debating somebody or you're dealing with somebody, you want to presume that they know more than you do. You want to presume that their offense is going to be able to function. And it's not like the Bosa brothers. The two of them haven't missed games either. And I know the other one plays for, I almost said San Diego. But, like, sweet
Yeah,
God,
I get
man.
caught doing that shit, too.
I know. I always want to say San Diego. I remember the Vegas Raiders. It's the San Diego Chargers that's ingrained in me. I hate their draft, and I'll move on. And the thing of it is that John Lynch has done such an amazing job drafting. I almost feel like, can I question their draft?
Right.
But I didn't even like the players that they took, even though I hated their approach.
Yep.
And I think that's what did it for me. So who's the worst draft for you, my friend?
And it may be the same as yours. I have the Jets, Jets, Jets at number 1. I hate their draft totally. I mean, I like McDonald a little bit, but you and I talked about draft night that
Reach.
yeah, major reach. I think they were the first one to kind of throw the crazy reachness out there, and it's like it was either them or Washington. So it's like, okay, you addressed the position, but you took probably like the 4th or 5th guy option on there. So yeah, they had a lot of crazy weird picks. I think that they were in a position. You just added Rodgers, you got receivers, you got Bryce, whoever the running back is,
Bryce Hall.
He's really good. You got a speedster and their Wilson guy.
Mm-hmm.
So offensively, you've got your quarterback. So now it's like, hey man, I should take this opportunity to get best player available. I should just start doing that. Like I could get some really impactful players. Rodgers doesn't have much longer. He's got to make a play now for the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So you got to treat it that way. Denver does the same thing. They have to treat this as we've got Russell, at least he's a little younger, but we got him for a short period of time. We've got to make sure we make the run. But we have a little bit more space to work with. Rodgers doesn't. He's getting up there. So you make the investment in him, you got to start getting players that can make an impact now. You're not building
Yeah,
for the future here.
absolutely. Eh,
So McDonald, maybe he works out great, but you could have done so much better there. And then the rest of the draft, I don't know what you're thinking. I mean, maybe they work out, maybe they don't, but I just don't like, kind of like what you did with the Niners. I don't like their picks at all.
Yeah, and so the Jets were one of my dishonorables. Um, I didn't put them in my top five, mostly because I found more people defending the McDonald pick than I thought there would be, and I still don't like. He's a. I'm the same thing as you. He's a round one pick. We're not saying that the kid can't play. He's got crazy bend, and he's fat. He's got some moves, but he's pure. He is like, I was kind of critiquing Anderson Jr. Like, yo, this guy's, you know finesse, finesse, finesse. He's a less talented version of Will Anderson Jr. He is pure finesse. I don't know. He kind of almost reminds me of the guy he played with Arizona for quite some time. This kid out of UCLU. He's blazing fast. Anthony Barr, where he was pure speed. The guy was uber talented, but he was just nothing but. He was like 6'4", pure speed, no power, and obviously, McDonald's not that tall, but like he had some. He's just one of those guys. Like, you're good at football and you're talented, but it's hard to get production out of you. I think that's going to be McDonald. But still, I found enough people who were like, no, it's an okay pick, and the Jets, they had a bad roster, so they needed to fill stuff out. Okay, I get it. My issue, and maybe I should have put them in there too, is if they're doing best player available, there's no way that McDonald is a better player than whoever their top wideout was on their
Right.
board.
Right.
You know, um, and Jackson Smith made so much sense for them. Zay Flowers made so much sense for them. Quentin Johnson made so much sense for them. But some people would say, well, they signed Randall Cobb and
Yeah,
the
but
other those
it,
guys suck in Green Bay.
what was the other one? Lazard. Like
Yeah.
you've got these former Packers, but they weren't very effective when you were in Green Bay. So
Yes.
like,
Randall Cobb was last good 7 years ago.
right. So the only other pick I really liked on the Jets thing was Barnes out of Western Kentucky, but that's like a
Yep.
later pick that may not show up for another couple of years.
It's perplexing. The pick that absolutely killed me, that I thought was just a throwaway pick, was Tipman in the second round. Look, they said we're not drafting him to be a guard. He's a center. You took a center. That's how you're fixing the line. You took a center. Your right tackle, Mekhi Becton. You didn't pick up his option because he's been bad when he's been on the field, and he's always hurt. He got demoted from left tackle to right tackle, and then he got hurt. Okay, he's a huge bust. And you're like, nah, let me get the center going. There, but Tippmann is a good player. McDonald is a good player. Carter Warren as a tackle is an interesting pick. You could actually, some people have argued it's a very high value pick, and he's a hidden sleeper. Maybe that's why they stayed off. And if the Carter Warren pick pans out, then they look like geniuses. I did not like their draft, and to be honest, I think I have just convinced myself that I should have swapped them in and Detroit out, because at least Detroit can say we have two players. Like, I might have. Ooh, it's real close.
Yeah, the only thing about the Jets is it comes off more as just like we picked a bunch of projects.
Yeah,
And I just concerned about it because you're in it for winning the Super Bowl within the next couple of years with Rodgers. That's all you got, really.
he's got 2 years.
Yeah, so if you're going to make your run, you can't just say, "Well, we're just going to pick up depth." You got to pick up
Yeah,
guys who could impact now. And I'm just worried that they didn't do that.
yeah, I agree. And then I think the other thing too, to your point about that, the one guy who's not a project that they took is Tippmann, and that's that's the center. So Sinners don't win Super Bowls. Like I feel like that's in the Bible almost. Like it's just not.
Yeah, you gotta go out there and compete with Buffalo, and now Miami's getting better too. So like, what are you gonna do, man? Like, you gotta make running now. Like, it's no time
Yeah.
than the
But you know who
present.
they don't have to compete with? My number one team with the worst draft in all of football.
The
And I
Denver
since
Broncos.
I no, absolutely not. I thought that you guys did a lot for what you could do. It's the New England Patriots. I hated their draft. They took Christian Gonzalez, and I was like, there we go. Common sense has prevailed. And then I look at the rest of their picks. Okay, Keon White. Okay, that second rounder. That's a pretty good pick.
Yeah, I like the
Mapu,
white pick.
The linebacker. Oh, okay, all right, I guess. Then you get to the fourth round. Jake Andrews, the center. I don't. Chad Ryland, the kicker. I don't. This isn't going well. Sidney Sao, rather, the guard. This doesn't feel great. Antonio Mafi, the guard. This doesn't feel great. Oh, sixth round, the wide receiver. Okay, I did a fair bit of research on the old New England offense.
I like how he cringles the paper like he's researching. Yeah, I got
I
all my
did. That's
notes.
right. This. I have this random piece of paper, and it represents all the research that I didn't do. It's the bluff. It's my bluff. It's my bluff. It's all the hate that I wrote down about this god awful draft. Okay, so other than the fact that the first two picks were fine, and the rest I thought were horrible and huge reaches. Like I'll just give you a quick rundown. After round two, most analysts would tell you their next three or four picks were reaches. So that's a lot of reaching. Okay, their offense, their fucking offense is 26th in yards per game, which is bad, which is really really bad. It was 16th in points per game. Now, part of that was because of defensive touchdowns and field position, and they kicked a lot of field goals.
Yeah, I was
Like
getting ready to say their best aspect last year was defense.
was defense, and they had a good running game.
Yeah.
Um, so they're 16th in points per game. So they are average, dead average in points per game based off of that defense and field position and kicking a metric shit ton of field goals. Like so many field goals, it's sickening. They were 20th in passing yards per game. Okay, so that's not very good. Now, I don't like Mac Jones. He is not a good quarterback. He is a game manager. He has zero intangibles that I believe in. All right. His arm sucks. He's got some mobility, and that's nice. He will never be a great quarterback. He could. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, and it's really asking you a question here.
Yeah.
I know they have Jones, they have Zappo.
Yep.
Would they have been better served to take a shot at Will Levis?
That's what I was getting to. So
Okay.
they were linked to, and this was kind of funny. They had heavy rumors about them being linked to Lamar. That
I
that
remember that. I remember that. Yeah.
because that would have been such a weird marriage between Lamar and Bill Belichick. But I could have seen it work in a certain way. Um, Zappy and Mac Jones are the same guy. They liked Mac Jones so much that they drafted him twice, and he's not good. He's not. He's just not good. He
So
can't.
good we drafted him twice.
He's just not a good quarterback. Now they screwed him. They made their caveman defensive coordinator their OC. They put him in a position to fail. And this is what I'm getting to. Let's say you don't think that Mac Jones sucks as much as I do. All right. I'm not going to read the depth chart to the Patriots offense for their skill position players out of respect to the position of wide receiver, just the concept of wide receivers existing. They have some decent tight ends, but again, it's like they did what Buffalo did, where they just kept stacking the same types of guys at tight end, and magically they're like, "Well, it worked with Hernandez and Gronk." Yeah, because you had Gronk, because you had the bionic caveman running down the field, slapping cornerbacks, scoring touchdowns, spiking the ball into the ground. It's mind-boggling to me. And at first, I thought that he didn't get weapons for Tom Brady out of spite, out of some sense of like jealousy and being outdated. Like he forgot when he had.
It's called ego.
ego. When he had Randy Moss and Dante Stallworth and all those guys, he was like, no, those years didn't exist. I didn't lose that Super Bowl. No, he just doesn't believe in them. They have no speed on that team. They have no game-breaking ability. They have no one who can run a freaking 40-yard dash in fewer than 4.6 seconds on their team who's not a goddamn running back. And all they did was draft a bunch of defensive players and a bunch of offensive linemen. And you know what, Bill? That worked for you in 2001. And then you had to let Tom learn how to play quarterback. And all of a sudden, it's like you forgot that. I want to just, I mean, I hate to do it again, but who the fuck are these guys? I don't know who City Sal is. I don't know who Jake Andrews is. I did over 100 mock drafts. I read a lot of big boards. Who are these guys? They were out fishing, thinking they were going to be UDFAs, and they're like, "What? I'm a Patriot? That sounds strangely depressing, but at least I'll get paid." It is a horrible draft. The Patriots, if they make the playoffs, it's just going to be off of running the ball on defense, and then some team like Buffalo will slap them by 35 points again, and they'll have wasted more of their fans' times. They should have gone up and taken a quarterback, traded for a quarterback, or whether it's in the draft or free agency or something. This year is a waste. And when they have zero chance of being a great team or getting better or moving the needle, and you drafted a bunch of randoms, you have wasted a season. And Bill Belichick, I used to think that you were football Jesus.
Well, I don't know. Hold on. I think I just had a little light bulb go off because I was getting ready to say that one of Belichick's worst issues is that he has an ego and he thinks he can make wine out of water. However, his ultimate game plan here might be Khalid. Like that might be what he shoot for because it is hard to believe that they wasted so much of this draft on stuff that you're just like, what are they doing? And it's weird because I know that Belichick believes that he can take a quarterback like Jones, who Jones is basically Tom Brady as a rookie. But the problem is Jones doesn't have the upside that Brady had. And Jones doesn't have the upside that Levis has. So, like, if you were going to improve that position, Will is like a good choice there. Like to say, okay, Jones will start. We have Zapp. Now we have Levis. So if push comes to shove, we're going to throw that kid in there and see if he can lift this team up because he might have more upside.
And I think that they might have drafted him if Levis didn't shit the bed so much in his interviews,
right?
And all the weird shit that he did in college.
So now it's just a matter of, does Belichick believe he can still turn water into wine, or is he playing the long game and trying to get into that top 10 pick for next year?
I don't even think that's going to work because they're too good defensively and they're too good at running the ball. I mean, they are the most mediocre. They are the hammiest ham sandwich in the goddamn NFL. Like you have all these teams like making filet mignon, and you have some other teams who are eating dirt and seasoning it with grass, and you have them dead in the middle going ham sandwich. Like I hate it. I cannot imagine being so smart as Bill Belichick. He still understands football. It's like, bro, you do nothing but destroy wide receivers. The same guys who go in there and light up the rest of the league. And you're just like, I don't need any of those. I need my third tight end of the draft. I just hate it. And so I think on paper it's a bad draft. The Patriots have been a shitty drafting team for quite some time. It's a bad draft just on its face, and contextually it gets worse. I hate it. I don't like most of the players that they took. And the worst part of all of it is they could have gone up and traded for a quarterback. This draft had the most trades, I think, ever. I know it was up there and it had like a ton. I think that didn't it set the record for round one trades?
Yeah.
It was insane. This was the draft to be a mover and a shaker. And the Bill Belichick.
What's funny about that though is that New England is notoriously known for being very smart when it comes to trading the draft, but usually they're trading down.
Yep.
So they usually get a lot of accolades like, oh, that's a brilliant move by Belichick to move down and still get your player. But see, this is a year where it didn't really pan out the way they thought it might because, like you said, they probably would have been better apt to move up instead of down or anything that they
Exactly.
did.
And now that everybody is trading, now you can't fleece people with trading down. And they also needed to trade because it happens more. It's like, oh, people are starting to catch on just how it works mechanically.
Yeah.
But then it gets worse for them because they're so bad at drafting that they need those volume of draft picks just to get guys. Because it used to be, oh my God, they always release people after they're up for a big contract and it works out, and then they did. And now it's like you see guys leave them and they do better. It's no longer they're winning the business side of football. And my biggest frustration. I hate the Patriots, so it's not like, oh, I feel bad for them or anything. Fuck them, they're cheaters. They have at
It's
least two
probably one
Super.
thing you and Jada get on board with.
Yeah, they're cheating. They should have had at least two Super Bowl stripped from them, and that's why Brady's not the GOAT, regardless of my beloved takes that are well received by you that you totally adore. They will never ever be bad enough to be able to not give up 5 first rounders to go out there and get a pick. And so they're just screwed. They are stuck in mediocre land. But way to go. You sure got those guards, Bill. You sure got them, buddy.
I just wanted let's go ahead and we'll pick one player. You have to probably think about yours a little bit that you think was an interesting pick or how you think they're going to do. I have one player in mind. It's going to drive Jaden crazy, of course. I
Stetson
didn't know.
Bennett to the Rams.
Yep, you got it. And so, like, I kind of like it in the sense that he's kind of like an heir apparent to Bradford. So, or not Bradford, excuse me,
Stafford. I
Stafford.
knew what you meant.
So, he's kind of the same type of player. Maybe not have the arm that Stafford does, but he's in the same build, the same mold. He'd probably fit the offense. So, granted, it was a late round draft pick, so it doesn't really matter in terms of like you're not wasting any money there. It's just whether or not he works or he doesn't. What do you think of that pick and where he went?
I thought the 4th round was a little early for him. I thought that he should have been drafted. Um, Sean McVay likes to have his quarterbacks. He likes to cycle through them. He likes to kick the tires. Um, some people might say that's being a scrub lover. Some people might say they're looking for their Matt Schaub like Kubiak did, or their Brett Favre like the Packers did. Like there's a lot of different ways you can slice it. It'll probably come down to personal preference and biases.
Right.
Um, but Stetson Bennett is an interesting guy because he's older, he's got that chip on his shoulder, and nobody gets his arm strength right. Some people say he has the weakest arm that has ever existed, and some people overrate it.
You mean Jared?
Um, well, no, it's not just him, but yeah, I mean, shout out to my chair went backwards for a second, and I scared the shit out of myself.
One day we're gonna get that motherfucker on this show
It
because
took me 2 months to teach him how to use Discord. So he also broke his cell phone one time texting me. I
ah
showed him how to do the reply function on the iPhone, and he
yeah.
kept turning his cell phone on and off because he didn't know how to get out of it. And I was like,
Oh my
tap this.
god.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. It drove me insane.
Technology challenge for sure.
He is a 57,000-year-old man. The Bennett pick I thought was fine. Like it was probably early. I didn't really like it, but you can make the argument that well, look how good Mayfield looked last season with the Rams.
That was very interesting. Why didn't Mayfield stay? Why did they not keep him?
The Bucks gave him a starting job and more money.
Oh well, that would do it. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
in a no tax state. You know,
But yeah, I was kind of surprised at how Mayfield looked. Like I thought he looked competent and he played pretty
he
well.
did because they put him in the Cleveland offense and were like, okay, you're only throwing 3 routes, so it's gonna be okay. For an interesting pick, um, you know what? I think I think the most interesting pick, and I know it doesn't have to be in the 1st round, but
No,
I
it doesn't.
think I think a really interesting pick for the 1st round. I'm gonna say Zay Flowers,
Okay.
and I'm gonna say Zay Flowers for this reason. I was gushing about him all night, and I'm horrified that Baltimore has him. So now I'm hoping that I'm wrong. But if he is that dynamic, I can play in the slot, I can play out wide, I can do all this guy. And he makes it easier over the middle of the field for Andrews. Then even if they don't have anybody out wide who's good, like let's say Odell gets hurt and Duvernay is not that good, whatever, whoever that guy is, he is now going to have as easy of a job as he could possibly do. And so for Zay Flower, he's interesting because one, I think he's going to be really, really good no matter what. But it's how good is he as a rookie? And does he unlock that offense? Because a lot of times for offenses, it's all matchup based. So this guy, you have to count for him here, which makes it easier over here, which, you go through the progression. Now all of a sudden, one guy makes such a big impact, kind of like how you have an Aaron Donald on the defensive line, and now it's just so much easier for your pass rushers. That's why a bunch of the guys who we're getting 10 sacks with them, and then they got Von Miller, and Von Miller looked like, prime Miller, for a defensive comparison. So Zay Flowers to me is fascinating because what that would mean for the Baltimore offense is that they now have enough firepower, so all the Lamar guys, myself included, can't say shit, right? Unless everybody else gets injured and it doesn't matter. And then secondly, and this is the big thing, if that's what their passing game looks like, how horrifying is it to deal with their play action game? That one guy can really do a lot for that offense, which then lets those busted ass corners that they have not have to work as hard, and they can be in pass rushing situations, which is a horrible place to be against the Ravens.
Yeah, I think their biggest thing on offense right now, Lamar's side, is can they stay healthy? Like those running backs, they all do very well in that offense. Like there's like two or three of them, but the reality is they can't stay healthy. So whenever that fails, it's up to Jackson to carry the rushing load, and that of course sets them back a little bit because.
Yep.
So now, like it's like you said, if Flowers comes in, we're gonna find out if Baltimore fixed that part of it because we know that's been a complaint of Lamar and some of the fan base.
Yeah, and it's the injuries to your point too. Andrews is getting a little bit older. He's had some. The running backs have some. Their corner. I mean, they've had rough injury luck. And just Odell is a big injury concern.
Yeah, he's old.
He's old, and he's on knee surgery number 2 or 3. Fuck, man. I mean, it comes down to if they're healthy at the end of the year, I don't care what seed they are. That's a horrifying game.
Yeah, it's a dangerous team. Like
it's a dangerous
and
team.
we talked about it this past year. If Lamar plays that game against Cincy, they probably win that game.
Yeah, he definitely doesn't fumble that. Like
right.
that fumble was backbreaking. Now you could argue, oh, Cincinnati took them lightly because Lamar wasn't there and all that. Okay, I don't know about all that.
Cincy and Baltimore always have great games. Like it's that division. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, it is that division. If that division is bad, it's only bad for 1 year. It's not like the NFC West was notorious for just being ass awful for a half decade. That's when they always come. Right now, and maybe it will start to change, but the AFC South has not been good in a minute. But
yeah, well, things are weird. Isn't that the one with Jacksonville? Like it's weird when you have this team that usually the bottom feeder now becoming the worst, or like the best team in that division. So it's really weird.
And the Titans, who are typically the best team, at least since post Manning, they're on their way down. Yeah. Oh, and you know what? Actually, Will Levis could have been a pick for them too.
Well, didn't Levis go there?
No, I mean like for an interesting player.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The other one that came to mind to me was the pass rusher that the Chiefs took. Felix, I forget. He's got a longer last name. He's from Kansas State. I will say, if I had to pick somebody out of the first round who wasn't Porter Jr., because that's fascinating in so many different ways. It would have been, what was the name of we were talking about him? He was the corner, he was the tackle out of Pittsburgh. that was taken, and that team was kind of banking on him to be better than the third round pick. Carter Warren, I want to say he's a really interesting guy for that reason. But there are some other guys, but I won't lie. It's like all first and second rounder guys are just sticking to. No, fuck it. The punter, the third round punter. I want to see the third round punter go out there, be the next Ray guy.
Come fantasy football, Poet selects first round punter.
Oh.
Well, sir, thank you for joining me again for another great episode of Poetic Carnage.
Thank you for having me.
This was a lot of fun, as usual. Don't know what we're going to talk about next, but we'll figure it out along the way. Anything coming up for you at all?
Nothing in the imminent future. I think maybe I might have some stuff in about a month or two, so I'm real excited about that. But I don't want to say anything and not have it come to fruition, because then I just feel like an asshole. So we'll see. We'll see how it shakes out.
Yeah, so tomorrow, Neko and I think we're going to jump back into my top 50 movies of all time. We're going to be doing 40 through 31, and I'll be looking forward to that. And then I'm trying to set up an interview with Norman Skinner, who is now the new lead vocalist of Forbidden. And so I'll hopefully get an interview with him, with Neko and I, talking to him a little bit about what he's been doing, and that'd be a lot of fun too. So
hell yeah.
For the rest of you watching us, thank you for tuning in. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe.
Subscribe. This is the hardest working man on the internet. If you don't,
not me. This is Mr. Data Guy over here.
This is. Let me tell you something. I'll break into all of your houses anyway. Eat your food. This time I won't use your bathroom. I'm going to give it a break. I will mow your yard, but I will mow it in a way that you don't like. If it's this way, I'm mowing it this way.
You're gonna see him like a dog dragging his ass in the grass.
That's right. Just sitting there going, I need to go to the vet.
Thanks again, all. We'll see you next time here on Poetic Carnage, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Stay metal.
Cheers.
Just